Chapter 711. Dong Qikuan felt like vomiting blood at this moment. Wang Xuaning's words were powerful, but the problem was, how could he lend something that he didn't have? Therefore, Dong Qikuan could only say helplessly, "Brother Wang, I didn't lie to you. I really don't have any 7 limits. Those rumors in the pugilistic world were deliberately spread by someone to frame my Dong family. Since we are old friends, why would I lie to you?" Dong Qikuan spoke so sincerely, but Wang Xuaning still revealed a look of disappointment. Good. Dong Qikuan, I must have been blind to have made a friend like you. Fine, since you don't care about our past relationship, then fine. Today, we will sever all ties. From now on, we will have no more contact. Seeing that Wang Xuaning actually put on an aggrieved look, Dong Qikuan almost wanted to curse. However, things had already developed to this point. Dong Qikuan didn't care about the severed ties anymore. But at this moment, another voice sounded. "Patriarch Dong, are you so heartless to your friend? I and Patriarch Dong are not friends, so it will be more difficult for me to borrow the ancient book of the 7 limits. However, I am a person who follows the rules. I don't want to read the 7 limits. I just want to trade for your Dong family's heaven-devouring worms. Don't worry, you can name the price. I can afford it." An old man with a hunched back and an ugly face, but dressed in luxurious clothes, walked out from the darkness. Seeing this person, Dong Qikuan and Patriarch Dong's hearts sank at the same time. Ghost Worm King, Situ Qing. This person was not someone to be trifled with in the West Chu martial world. Everyone in Jianghu knew that moon-worshipping cult's witchcraft was unparalleled in the world. However, in addition to moon-worshipping cult, other people in Jianghu also knew some witchcraft. Situ Qing was one of them, and his cultivation was not weak. He had the strength of a martial Dao grandmaster, and he even had a few powerful goo worms that were praised by moon-worshipping cult. It was even said that the moon-worshipping cult had once spent a lot of money to recruit Situ Qing, but Situ Qing had rejected them. Of course, the reason for this rejection was not because Situ Qing had a righteous heart. The reason why he rejected the moon-worshipping sect's invitation was because Situ Qing's temper was even more eccentric and violent than Wang Xuaning's. After joining the moon-worshipping sect, he was afraid that he would offend the moon-worshipping sect, so he directly rejected them. With Situ Qing's personality, he was already being polite enough when he spoke to the Dong family. Situ Qing snorted and said, "Dong Qikuan, I'll just say it directly. Your Dong family doesn't know anything about voodoo art. The heaven-devouring insects are wasted in your hands. Give them to me, and I'll give you everything you want. Moreover, even if you want to hand this thing over to the moon-worshipping church, you won't have a good ending. The moon-worshipping church won't treat you as a true confidant just because you have the heaven-devouring insects. Moreover, if I remember correctly, your Dong family has already joined the alliance of the righteous sections. If you hand this thing over to the moon-worshipping church now, it will be very inappropriate. Therefore, trading the heaven-devouring insects to I is a wise decision. I think your Dong family will make the right choice." Dong Qikuan said helplessly, "Don't talk about the heaven-devouring insects. My Dong family doesn't have any insects at all. Why won't you listen to me?" Situ Qing's face darkened. "Your Dong family is going to be stubborn to the end? Don't be so shameless. I rarely speak to people calmly." Situ Qing's words were not an arrogant threat. This was his original personality. When he saw something good, he would directly snatch it. However, because the other party was one of the 9 great families, the Highland Dong family, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to snatch it. Therefore, he calmly wanted to trade. He didn't expect that the Dong family wouldn't give him face. Right at this moment, Chu Xiu walked over leisurely with the heavenly demon dance in his hand, and he said indifferently, "Patriarch Dong, you're in the wrong if you don't share something good with us. Previously, when I came to trade the divine abandoned jade, you didn't agree to one cultivation technique. Instead, you wanted several cultivation techniques. Fine, I agree now. As long as you give me the divine abandoned jade, I can give all of these cultivation techniques to your Dong family. However, you must let me have a look at your Dong family's 7 limits. Don't worry, I won't leak the cultivation techniques. Although I, Chu Xiu, am not a good person, I will still keep my word. Some of the spies sent by the large sects were secretly observing everything. When they saw that even Chu Xiu had appeared, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This time, the Dong family was in big trouble. None of the people who came were easy to deal with. The Yunling Valley master, Wang Xuening, was not weak among the rogue grandmasters. Situ Qing's gu worms were even praised by the moon-worshipping sect. Moreover, there was also Chu Xiu, a devil who had stirred up a storm of blood in the northern Yen. Since the 3 of them were forcing the Dong family to hand over the items, they had no choice but to hand over the items. However, unexpectedly, Dong Qikuan shouted in grief and indignation, "My Dong family doesn't have any 7 limits." Everyone present was stunned. Oh, this Dong family was really unyielding. They were still standing firm at this time. Did they think that they could be protected by the righteous Dao sects after joining the righteous Dao alliance? The others secretly shook their heads. The righteous Dao alliance only targeted the diabolism. If something related to the diabolism sects happened, the righteous Dao alliance would protect them. Now, this was purely a private matter of the Dong family. Even if Chu Xiu came forward, he was only here for the treasures. It had nothing to do with the conflict between the righteous Dao and the diabolism sects. Those righteous Dao sects had nothing better to do than to meddle in this matter. Chu Xiu's face sank as he said, "Dong family head, this is where you are wrong. Greed is not a good habit. However, I don't want to cause trouble. All the cultivation methods I told you before are valid. I will add 3 more cultivation methods as a bonus in exchange for the right to see the 7 limits. What do you think?" Dong Qikuan still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by the patriarch of the Dong family. Previously, they had suspected that this matter was caused by Chu Xiu. However, now that they saw that Chu Xiu believed it himself and even came to them to trade the 7 limits, it seemed that this matter had nothing to do with Chu Xiu. But it was precisely because of this that they felt a headache. If they really had the 7 limits, they would be happy to take them out since Chu Xiu had taken out so many cultivation methods to trade. However, the problem was that they didn't even have 1, let alone 7 limits. The patriarch of the Dong family stepped forward and directly cupped his hands. "Everyone, our Dong family really doesn't have the 7 limits. The heaven-devouring insects, these rumors are clearly aimed at our Dong family. You are trying so hard to force us, but do you know that you are actually a knife in the hands of others? I can swear here that if I lie, I will die a horrible death. Even if I go to the Yellow Springs, I will suffer the pain of thousands of arrows piercing my heart. The Dong family will also be destroyed and completely disappear from the Jianghu." Karma was something that could not be predicted. Therefore, few people in the Jianghu would make such a vicious oath to deceive others. It was inauspicious. Moreover, as the patriarch of the Dong family, it was even rarer for him to make a vicious oath on his own family. Could it be that the Dong family really didn't have the 7 limits? However, at this time, Chu Xiu stepped forward and said with a cold smile, "Patriarch of the Dong family, don't say so many useless words. I have shown my sincerity. I just want to ask you one question. Do you agree to the 7 limits or not?" At this time, the patriarch of the Dong family also wanted to spit out blood. He shouted angrily, "How can I agree to something that I don't have?" Chu Xiu shook his head and raised the heavenly demon dance in his hand. Then, he sighed and said, "You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. I am a person who seldom talks about reason and rules with others. Unfortunately, you refused my good intention. It seems that no matter what happens, it is more useful to speak with the saber in your hand than with your mouth." The others thought that Chu Xiu was talking about now. However, only Chu Xiu knew that he was talking about the sacrificial divine jade that he had come to the Dong family to trade. If the Dong family had agreed to him at that time, they would not have been in such a mess now. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu directly slashed out with his saber. Majestic demon qi and murderous qi gathered together. When the saber slashed out, the world became dark. The surging demon chi seemed to cover the sky and the sun. The saber momentum was even more ferocious and domineering to the extreme. Everyone present sighed with emotion. No wonder Chu Xiu was willing to offer so many things in exchange for the 7 limits. His attainments in saber techniques were really domineering. Situ Qing laughed strangely and said, "That's right. I like this little kid. If you don't want to give it to me, I will take it by force. The 7 limits are yours, but don't fight with the heaven-devouring bugs." After all, Situ Qing was alone. Although he believed that neither Dong Qikuan nor the patriarch of the Dong family could defeat him in a one-on-one fight, what was the most important thing in a family? It was the foundation. As one of the 9 major families, which family did not have some trump cards passed down by their ancestors? Even if he could defeat Dong Qikuan and the patriarch of the Dong family, he would not be able to handle the Dong family's trump cards. It was very likely that he would fail miserably in an easy task. Now that Chu Xiu had taken the lead, he did not mind following along. Of course, 2 people would be more confident than 1. Moreover, Chu Xiu was an expert ranked on the excellence list. Therefore, the moment Chu Xiu made his move, Situ Qing also took a step forward. With a wave of his wide sleeve, a dense swarm of blood-colored flying bugs immediately flew out from his sleeve. The deafening sound was so deafening that it hurt one's eardrums. The swarm of black flying bugs flew rapidly toward the Dong family. When Wang Xuaning saw that both Chu Xiu and Situ Qing had made their moves, a hint of struggle appeared in his eyes. However, he did not make a move immediately. Although he was arrogant and surly, he used to be Dong Qikuan's good friend. Now that he had to kill Dong Qikuan and seize his treasures, he still felt a little guilty. At this moment, when Dong Qikuan and the patriarch of the Dong family saw that Chu Xiu had made his move without any reason, they could not help but curse in their hearts. It would have been fine if the Dong family had really obtained some benefits. However, they felt that they had been wronged to the extreme when someone attacked them for something that did not exist. Chapter 712. From the moment Chu Xiu made his move, he didn't plan to give the Dong family any chance to refute. People tended to follow blindly. As long as one person took the lead, the others would either follow to get a bite of meat or to drink a mouthful of blood. Situ Qing was the first to make his move. He wanted to get a bite of meat. The other martial artists who were watching also sent people to inform the people behind them that they wanted to drink a mouthful of blood. As Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, the Dong family's patriarch took the lead to meet it. The azure sword in the Dong clan's patriarch's hand rippled with a profound and powerful aura that was as vast as the ocean. It was vast and mighty, and its might was actually very extraordinary. Especially the aura of the sword, it could be said to be incomparably steady and solid. Although martial artists of the Dong family's patriarch's level and age basically had no fate with the Dragon and Tiger Storm Supreme list, they had cultivated for a lifetime and had a lot of resources to support them. Even a pig could accumulate a terrifying amount of power, let alone the Dong family's patriarch. During the Dong family's opening ceremony, the Dong family's patriarch's performance was so poor because his opponent was Qingqing Di, who could be said to be invincible under the true fire spirit refinement realm. However, when facing others, the Dong family's patriarch's own accumulation was very deep. Although his sword momentum and martial techniques were not outstanding, they were at least incomparably solid. However, as Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, regardless of his vast ocean or sword momentum, everything was shattered by Chu Xiu's saber. The demonic aura around Chu Xiu roared and rippled. The domineering saber momentum surged and slashed down continuously. Every slash seemed to be accompanied by the roar of a demon god, forcing the Dong family's patriarch to retreat several steps. After 7 slashes, the Dong family's patriarch had already retreated more than 30 meters, to the front of the Dong family's residence. Standing in front of the Dong family's residence, the Dong family's patriarch's face turned from red to pale. In the end, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The azure longsword in his hand had exploded, and the web between his thumb and index finger was dripping with blood. He looked extremely miserable. All the warriors present looked at Chu Xiu in shock. Was this really the realm of strength that a warrior of the younger generation could reach? Most of the West Chu warriors had never seen Chu Xiu fight, but the Dong family's patriarch and the others had. After all, he was an old man who had been famous for more than 100 years. His qi and blood hadn't deteriorated too much, and he still had the strength to fight back. But now, he had been seriously injured by Chu Xiu's 7 saber strikes. With the 8th saber strike, he would probably be killed. Of course, it couldn't be said that the West Chu martial artists were making a fuss. After all, they hadn't seen Chu Xiu fight as frequently as the Northern Yan and Eastern Qi martial artists. Although Wind's Sweeping Tower had already updated the news that Chu Xiu had killed the Divine Force sect master, Yan Huainan, the news was just news and not a video. Therefore, it was not that shocking. If they had seen the battle between Chu Xiu and Yan Huainan, they would have understood that Chu Xiu's current strength wasn't something to be surprised about. It was just his normal performance. On the other side, Chu Xiu had seriously injured the Dong family's patriarch with 7 saber strikes, which had also shocked Sita Qing, who had attacked with him. Just now, he had called Chu Xiu a little kid. Now that he had seen Chu Xiu fight, he couldn't believe that there was such a fierce kid in the world. However, even though he was shocked, his hands didn't move in a panic. The black goo insects rushed toward Dong Qikuan. Although they were easily swept away by Dong Qikuan's sword energy, he was shocked to find that those goo insects could actually devour the true qi and gang energy around him, draining his own strength like running water. It wasn't that shocking to see a warrior who specialized in refining goo insects make a move. Goo insects, goo insects. How shocking could a small insect be? Naturally, it wasn't as impressive as other warriors' sword energy, saber energy, or even Dharma idol condensed from gang energy. However, although the goo insects were small, those seemingly unremarkable goo insects could take one's life at a critical moment. One would never know how terrifying the power contained in the bodies of those small insects was. Just when Dong Qikuan didn't notice, a golden light suddenly shone from the black swarm of goo insects. That golden light had already arrived in front of Dong Qikuan without him noticing. The other blood-colored goo insects had been swept away by Dong Qikuan's sword before they could even get close to him. However, this golden goo insect directly ignored Dong Qikuan's gang energy and arrived in front of him almost in the blink of an eye. Only then did Dong Qikuan realize that something was wrong. In this critical moment, his whole body burned with blood qi, and he held his long sword horizontally in front of his chest. With a crisp sound, the long sword in his hand was directly broken. The golden goo insect deviated from its course and directly pierced through Dong Qikuan's shoulder blade, bursting into a cloud of blood. Sita Qing sneered and waved his hand. A golden light returned to his hand. It was a charmingly naive, chubby golden silkworm that looked somewhat adorable. However, no one could believe that such a small thing could actually cripple one of Dong Qikuan's arms. Dong family head, how does my King Kong silkworm taste? This is a goo insect that I refined after feeding it with the fragments of a divine weapon for 7 years. Even Lord Mountain Ghost, one of the 9 great divine magispriests of the moon-worshipping cult, praised it very much. Both the Dong family patriarch and Dong Qikuan were directly injured in almost a single exchange. This left everyone present speechless. Was the Jailing Dong family, one of the 9 great families, really so weak? Open the formation. The Dong family patriarch roared. The other Dong family elders were already prepared, and immediately opened the Dong family's formation. In an instant, the deep blue radiance of the formation transformed into a circle of light, enveloping the entire Dong family. In the past, the Dong family could not be considered weak. They had even produced a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse. This vast sea infinity formation had been set up by the Dong family at its peak. However, over the years, the Dong family had rarely used this formation. Even when they were being bullied, as long as it was not a battle of life and death, the Dong family would try not to use this formation unless it was necessary. For no other reason than the fact that this formation consumed too much energy. This formation was called the Vast Sea Infinity Formation. As the name suggested, once it was activated, it would possess a power comparable to the might of the vast sea. However, at the same time, it consumed as much energy as the vast sea. It was impossible to activate it by relying on the internal strength of a cultivator. Only a secret treasure that contained the world's origin energy could be used. The Dong family had such treasures, but they did not have many of them. Therefore, every time they used it, they had to be very careful. Of course, it consumed a lot of energy, but its effects were also obvious. Situ Qing's blood-colored goo worms, which could devour true qi, charged at the formation. It was like an egg hitting a stone. Every batch that charged at the formation would die. Situ Qing glanced at the King Kong silkworm in his hand, and a ruthless look appeared in his eyes. He released the King Kong silkworm and charged at the formation. However, the King Kong's silkworm was directly sent flying. It writhed in pain on the ground, and even the golden light on its body dimmed. Situ Qing glanced at Chu Xiu and said helplessly, "This turtle shell of the Dong family is really hard. What should we do?" Previously, Situ Qing had used his seniority to call Chu Xiu little boy. However, he did not dare to do so now. Of course, even if he did not call Chu Xiu little boy, he would not call Chu Xiu sir. Chu Xiu had not yet been born when he had wandered the Jianghu and made a name for himself in West Chu. Given his personality, he would not lower his head to the young celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen, even in front of him. Chu Xiu said calmly, "Since we can't break it, then we just wait. I don't believe that the Dong family can maintain the sex protective formation forever. Let's see who can outlast the other in the end." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, the expressions of the Dong family's patriarch and Dong Qikuan changed. The Dong family's sex protective formation actually had a fatal flaw. Although it had a strong defense, it did not have any offensive power. For example, the sex-protecting grand formations of the other sex were also focused on defense. However, since they were being attacked, they naturally couldn't just focus on defense. They would definitely have to counterattack. Therefore, their formations also contained killing formations. Some of the more extreme sex-protective formation was originally a killing formation. Since someone had attacked their sect, why would they care about life and death? They could just fight to the death with the enemy. What was the point of defending? Although the ancestor of the Dong family had reached the true fire spirit refining realm, he was really a coward. He had left such a formation for his descendants, which seemed to be invulnerable, but in fact, it was extremely deceptive. The faces of the Dong family's cultivators, who were operating the formation, turned pale. They looked at Chu Xiu with a trace of fear in their eyes. This person was simply too terrifying. He had seen through the flaw of the Dong family's sex-protective formation at a glance. Moreover, he had shamelessly set up such a plan to kill them. Now, they had no other choice but to defend it. Dong Qikuan and the Dong family's patriarch looked outside, hoping that other righteous sects would come to their rescue. After an hour, when the Dong family's elders had almost exhausted all their true qi, people finally came from the outside. It was Chen Jiankong and the others. To be more precise, they hadn't gone far at all. When he saw this scene, Dong Qikuan shouted loudly, "Everyone, since we're all from righteous sects, save my Dong family this once, and my Dong family will definitely repay you generously in the future." Chu Xiu stood there and said indifferently, "Everyone, all of you are smart. I believe you know what you should do. You've seen the Dong family's attitude. They won't hand over the treasure no matter what. All of you cherish your reputation and don't want to make a move. I don't care about my reputation. So, let me do it. So long as you don't interfere and mind your own business, all of you will have a share of the Dong family's treasure. Don't worry, I only want two things. One is the God-sacrificed jade, and the other is the 7 limits. Moreover, I won't take the 7 limits. I just want to have a look." None of the people present had any intention to make a move in the first place. Now that they heard Chu Xiu say this, none of them would make a move. It was even to the extent that some people thought that Chu Xiu was much more obedient than the Dong family. At the very least, he wouldn't keep the treasure for himself. Chapter 713. There were quite a few cultivators present here, and some even had friendly relations with the Dong clan. However, not a single one of them made a move. The members of the Dong clan couldn't help but sigh with emotion at the fickleness of the world. At the same time, boundless despair and absurdity surged in their hearts. If the Dong clan had been annihilated because they had offended someone or stood on the wrong side, then they could accept it. However, the only thing the Dong clan couldn't accept was that their entire clan had been annihilated because of a rumor. It was simply a joke. However, regardless of whether it was a joke or not, the Dong clan wouldn't be able to hold on for long. If they continued to delay, then the Dong clan would be completely finished once the formation was destroyed. Right at this moment, a wisp of ruthlessness appeared in the eyes of the Dong clan's ancestor, and he said to Dong Qikuan, "In a moment, I'm going to utilize the broken sword left behind by our ancestor. Take the disciples of the Dong clan and flee as far as possible." Dong Qikuan's expression changed abruptly, and he hurriedly said, "Yes, but ancestor, the broken sword." Dong Qikuan hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted by the Dong clan's ancestor, "No buts. If we still don't utilize the broken sword, then our Dong clan will really have no way to survive. It's a hopeless situation for our Dong clan now." As soon as he finished speaking, the Dong clan's ancestor directly withdrew an extremely pitch-black broken sword from the space chest, and it was still stained with specks of blood. The broken sword had been in the space chest for an unknown period of time, but the bloodstains on it were still fresh, and it seemed as if it had just been pulled out from the body of something. As soon as the sword was unsheathed, a ferocious aura instantly bloomed, and it caused Chu Xiu's expression to change slightly. The ferocious aura didn't belong to a human. It seemed like an ancient ferocious beast, and it emanated an ancient desolate aura. It was the purest ferocious aura of the strong preying on the weak. Chu Xiu's feeling was correct. Although the broken sword was forged by a human, the bloodstains on it didn't belong to a human, but a ferocious beast. There were all sorts of ferocious beasts in the western Chu country's Grand Myriad Mountains. In the past, an ancestor of the Dong clan had once found a ruin in the western Chu country's Grand Myriad Mountains. It seemed to have been left behind by an ancient expert after a battle with a ferocious beast. But unfortunately, because too much time had passed, the ruins were even directly exposed to the outside world, so most of the things had disappeared, leaving only a broken sword stained with the blood of an ancient ferocious beast. Using this broken sword consumes not true qi, but one's own qi and blood. If he used his own qi and blood to activate the aura left behind by the ferocious beast on the broken sword, he would be able to unleash an extremely ferocious might. However, this broken sword was simply too ferocious. As soon as it started to move, there was no one to stop it. Now that the patriarch of the Dong clan had decided to activate the broken sword and let Dong Qikuan escape with his men, it was obvious that he was ready to die. The moment the spell formation outside the Dong clan's residence dissipated, the Dong clan patriarch's blood and qi surged, and the broken sword in his hand emitted a fierce aura. The blood and qi around him formed the vague shape of a ferocious beast, which slashed toward Chu Xiu and Situ Qing. At the same time, Dong Qikuan led the Dong clan's men and immediately fled to the rear. As for whether anyone was left behind, he couldn't care less about it. The sword's power was like the aura of an ancient ferocious beast descending. Situ Qing waved his hand, and countless goo insects rushed forward to meet it. Before they even got close, they all trembled in fear, and actually refused to listen to Situ Qing's command, fleeing in all directions. Goo insects were also one of the living creatures in this world. Although it was unknown what level the ancient ferocious beast on the broken sword was, it was obviously extraordinarily powerful. Naturally, it would have a great restraining effect on Situ Qing's goo insects. Without his goo insects, Situ Qing couldn't even use 10% of his strength. He was directly swept away by the fierce sword qi, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression instantly became extremely dispirited. On the other side, Chu Xiu didn't dodge the sword qi. Instead, he chose to take it head-on. As the fierce sword qi neared him, Chu Xiu's body instantly blossomed with a dazzling Buddhist light. The great sun behind him shone brightly and turned into the phantom of Vairocana. It slammed down with its palm, and the Buddhist light blotted out the sky. The great sun-changing art. A loud bang rang out. No matter how fierce the attack was, it was still suppressed by the vast power of Chu Xiu's palm. He moved forward step by step, and the Dong family's patriarch attacked again. This time, the phantom of Vairocana behind Chu Xiu formed a Buddhist seal with its hand, and the colorless sealing palm seal was used. Like a mustard seed, the universe turned upside down. Under this seal technique, everything was completely crushed. Seeing Chu Xiu's attack, Chen Jiankong and the others who were watching felt a trace of cold sweat rolling down their backs. The martial artists of the land of West Chu rarely saw Chu Xiu fight, but only now did they realize how terrifying Chu Xiu was. It was a kind of invulnerable despair. Chu Xiu had cultivated the secret techniques of Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic. His foundation of power, his physical cultivation, and the power of his primordial spirit had almost reached the level of proficiency. When facing different enemies, he could use all kinds of combinations of power to deal with them, making it impossible for his enemies to find any weaknesses. At the same time, Chu Xiu could easily grasp the enemy's weaknesses. Just like now, when facing the sword that was tainted with the aura of a ferocious beast, using the Buddhist techniques was indeed the best choice. The Buddhist techniques could suppress evil and slay the devil, and they could suppress the aura of the ferocious beast the most. Although Dong Qikuan had already run some distance away, Wang Xuening, who had not made a move all this time, suddenly moved and blocked in front of Dong Qikuan. Dong Qikuan said angrily, "Wang Xuening. We were good friends in the past, and now you want to ignore our past friendship and destroy my Dong family?" Wang Xuening sneered and said, "Past friendship? Since you said it was past friendship, why don't you even let me have a look at your 7 great limits? I've already said it just now. Today, we've severed all ties. Whatever friendship, it's long gone." As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Xuening charged directly at Dong Qikuan. Actually, in terms of actual strength, Wang Xuening was no match for Dong Qikuan. After all, the other party was the head of a family. Whether it was inheritance or cultivation resources, he was better than Wang Xuening. But just now, one of his arms had been crippled by Situ Qing's golden steel silkworm. Now that he was exchanging blows with Wang Xuening, he was no match for him after just a few moves. Meanwhile, on Chu Xiu's side, he used the Buddhist techniques to resist the Dong family's patriarch's broken sword. Step by step, he arrived in front of the Dong family's patriarch in just a few moves. On the other hand, the Dong family's patriarch was pale. Obviously, his blood energy had been depleted. Chu Xiu formed the fast and slow 9 words formula with his hands, and the 9 seals merged into one, landing in succession. In an instant, Buddhist light exploded with a loud bang, and it was extremely ferocious. The Dong family's patriarch held the Dong family's trump card, the broken sword. At this moment, he could no longer attack and could only defend. However, he was still hit by Chu Xiu until he spat out blood. Even the hand holding the sword was unstable. The Dong family's patriarch struggled as he spat out blood. My Dong family really doesn't have the 7 limits. His death had already been decided. He only hoped that Chu Xiu would believe him and let the Dong family off this time. Looking at the Dong family's patriarch, Chu Xiu's face suddenly revealed a mysterious smile. He transmitted his voice to the Dong family's patriarch. "Of course I know that your Dong family doesn't have the 7 limits. I knew it from the beginning." The Dong family's patriarch suddenly opened his eyes wide. Looking at Chu Xiu's expression, he finally understood. However, it was already too late. The 9 seals of the fast and slow 9 words formula combined into one. In an instant, a dazzling Buddhist light bloomed. The Dong family's patriarch's heart meridian was directly smashed. The blood on the broken sword in his hand also evaporated. Only the broken sword, which had lost its spirituality, fell to the ground. Meanwhile, on the Dong family's side, Dong Qikuan was still struggling to resist Wang Xuening. However, at this moment, a golden light suddenly pierced through his heart from the back. In an instant, a splatter of blood burst out, and he fell to the ground with an unwilling look on his face. Situ Qing waved his hand and recalled the King Kong silkworm. He sneered and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. With the death of the Dong family's two martial Dao masters, the rest of the Dong family completely collapsed and began to flee in all directions. It was only at this moment that Chen Jiankong and the others, who had not made a move before, waved their hands and led their disciples to control the Dong family's people. It was not that they wanted to kill them all, but they were afraid that the Dong family's disciples would escape with the treasures. Everyone present looked at each other, and the atmosphere fell into silence for a moment. The Dong family's people were already dead, but the problem was, how should they divide the final treasures? Everyone subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu was the youngest among them, he was also the strongest. If Chu Xiu wanted to monopolize the treasures, they had to join forces to have the confidence to resist him. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu said, "Everyone, I only want two things. One is the divine abandonment jade, and the other is the 7 limits. I will only record one of the 7 limits, and I will not monopolize them. As for the other things, you can divide them. I think no one here will fight with me for them, right?" Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. What they were most afraid of was Chu Xiu monopolizing the treasures. After all, they had seen the scene of Chu Xiu fighting the Dong family's patriarch just now. Chu Xiu's strength was simply overwhelming and terrifying to the extreme. Even though the Dong family's patriarch had taken out his trump card, he was still killed by Chu Xiu head-on. Chu Xiu was not greedy for what he wanted, so no one present said anything, and they took it as a tacit agreement. After the Dong family's people were controlled, everyone began to search the Dong family, and the treasures of the Dong family were turned over one by one. The divine abandonment jade was found by a patriarch of a small family. He immediately took the initiative to present it to Chu Xiu, and said flatteringly, "This is official Chu's divine abandonment jade." Everyone present curled their lips in disdain when they saw his expression. Chu Xiu did not always stay in West Chu. Did he have to flatter him like this? After a moment of disdain, everyone continued their search. However, after they searched the entire Dong clan, they discovered to their astonishment that even though there were many treasures in the Dong clan, there weren't any 7 limits or heaven-devouring insects. Moreover, they even interrogated the disciples of the Dong clan one by one, yet they actually came up empty-handed. Chapter 714. The news that the Dong family had a precious treasure had spread like wildfire. However, they had found nothing, which was unacceptable to the people present. What happened to the promised 7 limits? Where were the heaven-devouring insects? Where were they? Chu Xiu said with a gloomy face, "What the hell is going on? Could it be that the Dong family hid the treasure somewhere else?" The people present looked at each other and shook their heads. For such a precious treasure, everyone wanted to keep it close to their bodies. How could they hide it somewhere else? Chu Xiu looked at the warriors of the Dong family and said coldly, "I don't believe that the whole Dong family doesn't know where the treasure is. Drag out the warriors of the Dong family and kill them one by one. I don't believe that we can't find a result." The hearts of everyone present went cold. Isn't Chu Xiu a little too murderous? What if these Dong clan disciples really don't know where the treasure is? Then wouldn't they have died for nothing? Although most of the people present were greedy and coveted the precious treasures of the Dong family, they still had a bit of conscience. Therefore, someone immediately advised, "Official Chu, we have already interrogated them. Some people even used a secret method to detect them. They really didn't lie. It's useless for you to kill them." In fact, these people were not so resolute. If Chu Xiu insisted on killing the Dong family's disciples, although they couldn't bear to do so, they weren't saints who would risk their lives to stop him. However, Chu Xiu didn't insist on killing them. He just snorted coldly and said, "Bad luck. I spent so much effort, but in the end, I didn't get anything. How unlucky. After saying that, Chu Xiu left with a gloomy face. Situ Qing also turned around and left with a gloomy face. The only difference was that Chu Xiu's face became very calm the moment he turned around, while Situ Qing was very angry. He had lost a large number of goo insects in order to get the heaven-devouring insects. Even the King Kong silkworm he had carefully cultivated was seriously injured, but he still got nothing. The other people present were also a little angry. However, after seeing the gloomy faces of Chu Xiu and Situ Qing, they seemed to be comforted. The two people who had contributed the most had nothing in the end. They didn't seem to have done much, so it didn't matter even if they didn't get anything. Therefore, except for some people who still persistently dug 3 feet into the ground, the rest of the people left on the spot. The next day, the news of the Dong family's destruction spread all over the world. Strictly speaking, the Dong family hadn't been destroyed. Only their patriarch and patriarch had died, and the entire Dong family had been plundered. But without a martial arts grandmaster and without a family, the Dong family was no different from being destroyed. The Dong family had offended quite a few people in West Chu over the years, and now that the Dong family had declined to this point, how could they resist their enemies? It should be said that there was no way to block it at all. Other than stubbornly resisting, they would completely fall apart. Perhaps after a period of time, there would be no one in the entire West Chu that could claim to be from the Hai Ling Dong family. At this moment, in the Heaven Alliance, Qinqing Di was sitting on an exaggeratedly huge bronze chair. He held a cup in his hand, but it was filled with wine instead of tea. Black Tiger was lying lazily at his feet, looking listless and empty. Qinqing Di drank a mouthful of wine and rubbed his chin as he said, "So you're saying that the recent disturbances in the West Chu Jianghu were all caused by that brat Chu Xiu? You destroyed the Dong clan with a rumor?" Xia Xiaolu, who was sitting below, nodded. Strictly speaking, that seems to be the case. Regarding this matter, Xia Xiaolu could hide it from others, but he could not hide it from Qinqing Di. Even Chu Xiu did not let him hide it. It was impossible to use the power of the Heaven Alliance without letting Qinqing Di know. However, when he heard the news of the Dong clan being destroyed, Xia Xiaolu was dumbfounded. This was because he was the one who had helped Chu Xiu with this matter. He was also the one who had spread the rumor. He had never thought that a small rumor would have such great power. It had actually forced one of the 9 great clans, the Highland Dong clan, to commit suicide. In other words, it was not Chu Xiu or Situ Qing who killed the Dong clan. It was the greed hidden in human nature. The Dong clan thought that they would be safe after joining the Righteous Alliance. They did not know that after the news spread, if the Righteous Alliance did not care about their reputation, they would have been the first to snatch the Dong clan. Qinqing Di rubbed his chin. Interesting, Chu Xiu is interesting. Regarding this matter, Emperor Qinqing Di actually didn't have much of an opinion. With his cultivation realm, he was just watching a show. At most, he was just a little surprised. In Qinqing Di's eyes, the Dong clan, one of the 9 great families, was not even worth a fart. If he wanted to destroy them, he could directly bring the experts of the Heaven Alliance to their door. Destroying them was only a matter of time. However, the problem was that if he directly went to destroy the Dong clan, many sects would definitely jump out to meddle. Moreover, those who were qualified to meddle in his business were definitely experts, so it would be very troublesome. Moreover, Chu Xiu had taken a different approach and used some small tricks to destroy the Dong clan without causing any trouble. In Emperor Qinqing Di's eyes, this was also very interesting. Putting down his cup, Qinqing Di lightly snorted and said, "You juniors, only a few of you are capable. Let's not talk about people like Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian. You guys have a good relationship with each other. That kid Mo Tianlin's temper is too soft, and you are too stupid." Xia Xiaolu raised his head to express his dissatisfaction, but seeing Qinqing Di's glare, he immediately shrunk his head. "Lu Fengxian, that kid is really not bad, but he is a bit too naive. But as a person, it's fine to be a bit naive. Moreover, that kid's luck is good. As long as he doesn't die, his future achievements will be limitless. Hearing this, Xia Xiaolu wanted to refute. Why was Lu Fengxian naive, but he was stupid? However, after following his master for so many years, Xia Xiaolu had learned a principle. His master's words were always right, so it was best not to refute. That's right, that little girl Luo Feiheng is also not bad. Speaking of which, don't look down on that little girl right now. In the future, she might even be stronger than all of you. Among all of you, you are my disciple. Mo Tianlin has the Mo clan behind him. Lu Fengxian, that kid doesn't have any power, and even Chu Xiu, although he was born in the wilderness, actually has the Yinma clan behind him. Only that little girl Luo Feiheng, who previously had the Luo clan as her backing, is now fighting on her own in the Jianghu. This is what it means to start from nothing. If you were to be thrown into the Jianghu like this, you wouldn't even be as good as a little girl. If Chu Xiu was here, he would definitely be amazed at Qin Qingdi's foresight. This person looked rough, but in reality, his mind was extremely meticulous. In just a few words, he was able to point out everyone's shortcomings and strengths. Mo Tianlin's character was weak. Although his talent was not bad, if he wasn't born in the Mo clan, he would probably be very miserable in the Jianghu. As for Xia Xiaolu, he wasn't really stupid. If an existence ranked in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard could be said to be stupid, then there wouldn't be many smart people in the younger generation. His true flaw was that he was too straightforward and didn't know how to be flexible. As long as he was properly nurtured, he would become an outstanding successor of the World Alliance. Unfortunately, he didn't have Qin Qingdi's aggressiveness, nor would he have Qin Qingdi's strength. Lu Fengxian's character was even more obvious. Treating people with sincerity and naivety was his strength, but also his weakness. Without this, he wouldn't have become friends with Chu Xiu and the others, and Chu Xiu and the others wouldn't have made friends with him. But at the same time, he wouldn't have encountered so many troubles. So whether it was a blessing or a curse, no one could be sure. Qin Qingdi's most accurate judgment was still Luo Feiheng. Only Chu Xiu knew that the future Luo Feiheng's achievements would far surpass their imagination. Then what about Brother Chu? Xia Xiaolu suddenly asked. Qin Qingdi paused, then said, "To be honest, I can't see through that brat. Most of the time, I thought that he had already reached his limit, but I didn't expect that he could still give people some surprises. But this brat has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. When it comes to playing tricks, you guys can't compare to that brat." Qin Qingdi stood up, looked outside, and lightly said, "Of course, the scariest thing about that brat is that while he is playing tricks, he didn't give up on his martial arts training. He can distinguish his priorities, which is very rare." With that, Qin Qingdi looked at Xia Xiaolu and coldly snorted, "He is so much better than you, and he still knows how to run around in Jianghu, calculating his own benefits. But what about you? You still have the mood to chat here, hurry up and go train." Xia Xiaolu finally couldn't bear it anymore. With a wronged expression, he said, "Master, didn't you tell me to talk about Brother Chu?" Qin Qingdi glared, "You still dare to talk back?" As he spoke, he directly slapped Xia Xiaolu away, telling him to scram back to his room to cultivate. On the side, Hu licked his furry paws and yawned out of boredom. This pair of master and disciple's daily routine was one beating people, the other being beaten. It was nothing strange. After beating and beating, they would get used to it. Maybe they could even practice a golden shield or something. Chu Xiu didn't plan to care about the disturbance in West Chu. He directly took Yuan Ji back to Northern Yan. After Yuan Ji saw Chu Xiu's methods, he directly put away any thoughts that he shouldn't have. Even if he could divine everything, he couldn't divine the human heart. Chu Xiu's methods were a bit too terrifying. With just a few rumors, he completely destroyed the Dong family. The scariest thing was that the Dong family didn't even know how they died, which was a bit scary. Of course, Chu Xiu didn't tell him that the Dong family's ancestors should know, but unfortunately, he could only complain to Yama. In any case, Yuan Ji was scared and completely gave up on those little thoughts. If he joined the devil path, then so be it. In any case, he wasn't a good person before. Although he was a fortune teller, he also did a lot of things to cheat people. Chapter 7:15. In the eyes of ordinary people, divination masters should be cold and aloof. Only when you offered up your offerings would they pinch their fingers together and solemnly point at you, saying that you have an ominous barrier around you. You will definitely face a bloody calamity in the near future. Master Yuanji looked like this when he read people's fortunes in the past. But now that he was Chu Xiu's subordinate, he returned to his original appearance, which was very vulgar. This was Mei Qinglian's first impression of Master Yuanji, so she looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Did he mean to say that he went to West Chu and stirred up a bloody storm, but in the end he brought back this thing? Chu Xiu shrugged his shoulders and said, "Don't judge a book by its cover. This Master Yuanji has real skills." Chu Xiu wasn't trying to flatter Yuanji. Although the old Daoist was a bit wretched, the fact that he was received by the celestial master manner after going to West Chu was not only because of Zhang Quanzong's face, but also because the old Daoist had high attainments in the way of divination. After a few greetings, Chu Xiu brought Master Yuanji into the secret room. He gave the divine sacrifice jade to Master Yuanji and told him to use the divine sacrifice jade to perform the 3 lives reflecting technique. Chu Xiu wanted to do this when he was in West Chu, but he wasn't in his own territory at that time. Chu Xiu was afraid of an accident, so he endured it and waited until he returned to Northern Yen to have Master Yuanji perform the divination. Master Yuanji sighed as he held the divine shedding jade in his hand. His branch had wanted this for a long time, but his branch only produced fortune tellers and didn't produce any experts. Of course he didn't dare go to the Dong family to steal it. However, Master Yuanji didn't dare waste too much time. He placed the divine sacrifice jade in his hand and formed a seal. Instantly, a mysterious aura was released from the divine sacrifice jade. Grandmaster Yuanji said in a deep voice, "Sir Chu, when the 3 lives reflecting shadows technique takes effect, if you are really possessing or reincarnating a body, and your soul and body are not the same, you will see 2 people existing at the same time." Chu Xiu nodded. Following Master Yuanji's actions, his mental strength seeped into Chu Xiu's body. Without Chu Xiu resisting, Chu Xiu's mental strength gradually seeped into a grayish-white world. In this grayish-white world, Chu Xiu did not see the 2 of them. Instead, he saw the appearance of his previous incarnation, Lin Yi. This made Chu Xiu frown. According to Master Yuanji, if it was confirmed that he had taken over someone else's body or reincarnated, there should be 2 figures appearing now. One was the appearance of Chu Xiu in his previous life, and the other was the appearance of the current Chu Xiu. However, there was only one right now. Why did it have to be in the past? Before Chu Xiu could think further, the figure suddenly changed. It changed from the appearance of Lin Yi in his previous life to the appearance of Chu Xiu. The 2 faces flickered continuously, but in the end, the originally misty scene suddenly began to change. The surroundings actually turned into a blood-red appearance, and this part of the world had shockingly turned into the netherworld blood sea. Chu Xiu's consciousness floated in the blood sea. His constantly changing body stood in the blood sea. All of a sudden, he raised his head and looked at Chu Xiu as if he had a mind of his own. There was an unfathomable smile on his face. At the same time, the 2 faces started to blur, and a 3rd face appeared on the body. It was a face that Chu Xiu had never seen before. He could not tell its age, but it seemed very young. However, there was an endless vicissitudes of life in its eyes. His facial features were clear, but Chu Xiu could not describe what he looked like. He could not even remember what he looked like, even though this face was right in front of him. This was a very strange feeling. It was a very uncomfortable feeling, and it made Chu Xiu go crazy from the awkwardness. His figure took a step in the boundless blood sea. In an instant, the blood sea churned, and countless skeletons and malicious spirits howled and tore at each other. In an instant, Chu Xiu felt as if he had fallen into the yellow springs of hell. The face looked at Chu Xiu and said in an indescribable tone, "You're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." These words, which sounded like a lover's conversation, made Chu Xiu's hair stand on end. This was because the voice was exactly the same as his. With a loud bang, everything in front of him shattered. A cracking sound was heard, and the divine sacrifice jade in Master Yuanji's hand had shattered. Master Yuanji looked at the shattered divine sacrifice jade in his hand and then at Chu Xiu, whose face was pale and covered in cold sweat. He looked as if he had just been fished out of a water tank. Master Yuanji was stunned. What was going on? Although this was the first time he had used the 3 lives illuminating technique, the ancient books passed down by his ancestors had recorded the situation of using this secret technique. It was a very gentle secret technique, and there should not be any side effects. Moreover, although the 3 lives illuminating technique consumed a lot of energy, the divine sacrifice jade should be able to withstand it. How could the divine sacrifice jade have shattered? Chu Xiu took a deep breath and wiped the cold sweat off his head. He closed his eyes and tried to recall carefully, but he could not remember the person's face. Master Yuanji asked carefully, "Official Chu, are you all right?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm fine." Suddenly, Chu Xiu looked at Master Yuanji and said coldly, "Don't tell anyone about what happened today." When Chu Xiu glanced at him, Grandmaster Yuanji's heart trembled. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when Chu Xiu looked at him just now, he felt that Chu Xiu's eyes were blood-red, as if they contained an endless sea of blood. It was extremely ferocious and terrifying. Under normal circumstances, although Chu Xiu was ferocious, that was only in character. However, that gaze just now made Master Yuanji feel as if he was in hell, and his soul was about to be sucked out. However, when he looked again, Chu Xiu's gaze had returned to normal. It was just a normal threatening gaze. Master Yuanji's heart trembled again, and he hurriedly nodded and said, "Official Chu, don't worry. I'm blind and deaf today. I didn't see or hear anything." Chu Xiu nodded and waved his hand to let Master Yuanji leave. Everything he saw in the divine shedding jade's illusion made Chu Xiu understand more about himself. Although it was more confusing, he at least had a vague guess. But what did that person mean when he said, "You're finally here"? Was he waiting for me? Where was he waiting for me? In the blood sea of the Styx River? What was he waiting for me for? The series of questions made Chu Xiu's mind feel like it was about to explode. He shook his head and decided to stop thinking about it for the time being. After calming himself down, Chu Xiu walked out of the secret chamber. When Mei Qinglian saw Chu Xiu coming out with a head full of sweat, she said with a strange expression, "What were you doing in there with that guy? Why are you sweating all over?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't mess around. Let me ask you something. Do you have a portrait of Dugu Weiwei?" Mei Qinglian stared blankly for a moment before saying, "A portrait of sect leader Dugu? No." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "In the past, your Yin demon sect was an orthodox demonic sect, and one of the major demonic sects under the Kunlun devil cult. How come you can't even find a portrait of Dugu Weiwei?" Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, "You ask me, who should I ask? I'm not someone from that era. However, it's useless even if you look for that brat Lu Jin. In the entire Kunlun demon sect, or rather the entire pugilistic world, you won't be able to find a portrait of cult leader Dugu." "Why?" Mei Qinglian said, "Who knows? Anyway, there isn't one." "Right, why are you looking for a portrait of Patriarch Dugu?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I just want to admire the demeanor of Patriarch Dugu in the past. Forget it if you don't have it." After that, Chu Xiu waved and left, leaving Mei Qinglian frowning and looking at Chu Xiu with a hint of doubt. She could see that Chu Xiu had something in his heart, but since Chu Xiu didn't intend to say it, she didn't ask. "Right, there are some things that have accumulated in Jianghu Hall during this time. I need you to deal with them." As she said this, Mei Qinglian directly threw a few pieces of news to Chu Xiu. Jianghu Hall had just opened. In fact, there was no big deal. Generally, the people below would deal with it themselves, and they wouldn't even report it to Mei Qinglian. However, once it was reported, it was basically something that they couldn't make a decision on. Chu Xiu looked through a few pieces of news and suddenly said in a soft voice, "The old ancestor of the northern floating snow city is going to celebrate his 400th birthday? TSK, this old ancestor is not dead yet? It's really not easy. The northern floating snow city sent an invitation for us to go over?" The news that there was a true fire spirit refinement realm old ancestor in the northern floating snow city was known throughout the underworld, and every 10 years, he would celebrate his birthday. Although in theory, the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse could live to 400 years old, this was only in theory. It was not easy to really live to 400 years old. However, the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city had not made a move for nearly 100 years. It was even said that he never showed up in the northern floating snow city. Only on his birthday, on this joyous day, would he choose a young disciple to teach personally, and he would call him into the secret room to teach alone. It was difficult for others to see him. It was not uncommon to rely on closed-door training to reduce the number of moves, or even directly seal most of one's power to delay aging. For this kind of behavior, Chu Xiu was very disdainful. It was a shame for a martial artist to die of old age in bed. Regardless of whether he was a martial Dao master or a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist, he was also an influential figure in the underworld when he was at his peak. But now, he lived like a tortoise. Even if he lived a few decades or 100 years longer than others, what was the point? Mei Qinglian sneered at the side and said, "What are you thinking? With your current reputation, do you think the northern floating snow city will invite you to participate in the birthday? That's really not auspicious. It's a message from the Northern Yen Emperor. He hopes that you can make a trip there and reach an agreement with the northern floating snow city, allowing the Northern Yen army to station in the northern land." Hearing this, Chu Xiu suddenly frowned. What the hell was Xianglong doing? Why did they have to station their troops in the northernmost wilderness? Chapter 716. Chu Xiu disagreed with Xianglong's intention to station troops in the wilderness of the far north. In his opinion, Xianglong was obviously arrogant. Seeing that nothing had happened to the martial suppression hall after stirring up a bloody storm in the northwest Jianghu, he thought that he could really suppress the entire northern Yen Jianghu. In fact, the reason why Chu Xiu could do this was not because of his ability, but because of the moon-worshipping cult. It was because of the rise of the moon-worshipping cult that the attention of Chu Xiu's biggest obstacle, the Great Light Temple, was attracted. And because of the absence of the monks from the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu could do whatever he wanted in the northern Yen. Otherwise, unless Wei Shiya and the others took action, no one could go against those bald donkeys. Now, who was Xianglong preparing to station troops in the northern Yen? Who was he provoking? A place like the wilderness of the far north had no value at all. Although it was vast, it was sparsely populated. There were only a few sects like the floating snow city in the far north. There were also some local aboriginal tribes that could only rely on hunting for a living. There was no threat at all. Other than that, the wilderness of the far north only had the evil sect and the Great Light Temple. The evil sect was nothing to worry about. Was Xianglong challenging the Great Light Temple? Mei Qinglian said, "Are you going to go?" Chu Xiu stood up and said, "Since it is His Majesty's order, then I will go. As for whether the negotiation can be successful, it depends on the floating snow city in the far north." As long as Xianglong did not want Chu Xiu to do something like courting death by going against the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu could satisfy him. Moreover, Chu Xiu had a lot of grievances with the floating snow city in the far north. If there was a chance, even if he could not destroy the floating snow city in the far north, Chu Xiu planned to find a chance to annoy them. Chu Xiu had always been narrow-minded. Ever since Chu Xiu stepped into Jianghu, it was not that he had never suffered losses. However, most of the times he suffered losses were due to his own strength. If he was not as strong as others, then there was nothing much to say. However, the last time he joined forces with the drifting snow city in the extreme north to deal with the Morgue village, they were tricked by Han Tian, a thick-browed, big-eyed, and boorish fellow. Both he and Nie Renlong suffered heavy injuries and almost took Chu Xiu's life. Later on, when the Northern Yan Devil-Slaying Alliance was established, although the Northern Drifts Now City didn't participate, in truth, they did want to participate. However, they were stopped by Pang Hu. If not, there would definitely be people from the Northern Drifts Now City among those who ambushed Chu Xiu. Thinking of Pang Hu, Chu Xiu suddenly had a thought. At present, Pang Hu's position in the Northern Yan martial arts world was actually very awkward. Previously, he was the enemy of the imperial court and the righteous martial arts world. Now, although the hatred between him and the imperial court had been resolved and the 36 northern bandits had become history, it did not mean that the Qilian stockade could continue to walk openly in the Northern Yan land. Moreover, with Pang Hu's character, he and the other sects were even more intolerable. Therefore, at this time, if Chu Xiu opened his mouth to recruit him, he believed that Pang Hu would agree. After all, he owed Chu Xiu a favor. Of course, Chu Xiu's so-called recruitment was not to let Pang Hu become his subordinate. With the current strength and qualifications of Chu Xiu, if he opened his mouth to recruit him, even if Pang Hu owed him a favor, he would still be asking to be humiliated. Therefore, he recruited Pang Hu only for cooperation. If Pang Hu also joined the Jinwu Hall, Pang Hu could obtain the status of a Jinwu Hall member and be considered as a member of the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu could also gain an ally in the Northern Yan land. With this thought in mind, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to go to the Northern Floating Snow City. Instead, he first brought Mei Qinglian to look for Pang Hu. During this period of time, the Qilian stockade had not changed much from the last time. It was just that some of the branch stockades had been completely abolished, leaving only the main stockade in the dense forest of Liaodong to recuperate. Seeing that Chu Xiu had arrived, the people of the Qilian stockade immediately welcomed Chu Xiu in. After all, they had fought side by side. The Qilian stockade was very familiar with Chu Xiu and had a good impression of him. Pang Hu laughed as he walked out and said, "Young Master Lin." "Ah no, I should call you Brother Chu. During this period of time, your actions in the Northern Yan have been very impressive. Even I am envious of you." Originally, Pang Hu had a very forthright appearance when he walked out. However, after seeing Mei Qinglian, Pang Hu became bashful. He foolishly laughed twice, scratched his head and said, "Qing. Saintess Mei, why are you here?" Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "Why? Can't I come to your Qilian stockade? It's not that I want to criticize you, but why are you getting worse and worse? In the past, when the Northern 36 bandits were still around, you were considered a local tyrant. In the end, you were forced into such a state by the Zhuyi manor." Pang Hu was slightly unconvinced. In the past, when the Northern 36 bandits were still around, they had joined forces. Now, he was the only one left. It was not easy for him to achieve this. However, when facing Mei Qinglian, Pang Hu seemed to be a head shorter. He only held back his red face and did not refute. Intuition told Chu Xiu that these two people must have had a past. However, Chu Xiu did not ask much. He just went straight to the point and said, "This time, I came to find Leader Pang to ask you a question. Now that you know that I have joined forces with the Northern Yan Emperor Xianglong to establish the Jinwu Hall, I would like to ask Leader Pang if you are willing to join my Jinwu Hall. After joining the Jinwu Hall, Leader Pang will only have the identity of the Jinwu Hall in name. It can be considered as wearing the skin of the imperial court, so it will be more convenient for you to do things. You and I are acquaintances, so I will not waste too much effort. In the future, if the Jinwu Hall needs Leader Pang's help, then we will discuss it. There is no subordinate relationship." When it came to business, Pang Hu did not have the bashful attitude from before. He only frowned and said, "Brother Chu, you helped me a lot last time. Saintess Mei was also there. If it was just me, I would have agreed to it. But now, it involves the entire Qilian stockade. Even though I am the chief of the stockade, I do not want to decide the future of my brothers. So, Brother Chu, please forgive me. I need to discuss with them before making a decision." Chu Xiu nodded. Pang Hu's decision was very normal. As a leader, if Pang Hu made a decision for his subordinates so easily, then it would be called reckless and irresponsible. After being the leader for so many years, Pang Hu might seem rough, but he was not really a brainless person. After waiting for Pang Hu to leave, Mei Qinglian said, "Do you think that guy will agree? I know that the relationship between the 36 bandits of the northern land was very good in the past. It can even be said that the 36 bandits of the northern land were destroyed in the hands of the northern Yan imperial court. In the end, you are letting him join the Jianghu Hall. Although it is only wearing the skin of the imperial court, it is still very difficult for the Qilian village to accept." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "On the contrary, I feel that they will accept it very easily. The 36 bandits of the northern land are already dead, but the Qilian village still exists. Joining the Jianghu Hall is not bad for them. It is not worth it to block the path of the living for a bunch of dead people." Sure enough, less than a quarter of an hour later, Pang Hu had already returned. He gave Chu Xiu a reply that the Qilian village was willing to join the Jianghu Hall. Although there was indeed a small number of people who were not willing to join the Jianghu Hall, they were not even willing to become the imperial court's dogs on the surface, but most of them did not object. Most of the warriors in the Qilian village were martial artists in their prime. Due to the current situation of the Qilian village, they could only endure in this dense forest of Liaodong. 1 or 2 years was fine, but any longer and they would really not be able to endure. "Leader Pang, you have made a very wise choice." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "By the way, do you have time now, Leader Pang? Saintess Mei and I are going to the northern fluttering snow city." Pang Hu said in surprise, "Why are you going there? Are you going to make a move on the northern fluttering snow city?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "If we are really going to make a move, it will not be just the two of us. Xiang Long gave us a mission to go to the northern fluttering snow city. It is just in time for the birthday of the old ancestor of the fluttering snow city. Leader Pang, if you want to go, just take it as joining in the fun. I am afraid there will not be a fight this time." Pang Hu nodded and said, "Oh, so the old turtle of the Bai family is celebrating his birthday again. All right, I happen to have nothing to do, so I will go with you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Old turtle? The old ancestor of the northern fluttering snow city has a bad reputation in the northern Yan martial world?" Although Chu Xiu was also considered a northern Yan person, he actually did not stay in the northern Yan for a long time. Pang Hu was a real Jianghu hero from the northern Yan land. He actually knew some of the secrets of the northern Yan Jianghu better than Chu Xiu. Pang Hu sneered and said, "That old turtle was not a good person when he was young. When he was the city lord of the fluttering snow city, it was when the fluttering snow city was at its weakest. Even in the entire fluttering snow city, he was the only martial arts master. Therefore, he fawned on the Great Light Temple and even worshipped a Buddha statue in his own ancestral hall. Relying on his endurance and the protection of the Great Light Temple, this old turtle also stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm. The fluttering snow city also produced a few martial arts masters, but he swept away his previous humble attitude. While alienating the Great Light Temple, he eliminated dissidents in the northern land and suppressed other forces. Now you can see that in the northern wilderness, there are only 3 forces left. Other than the Great Light Temple and the evil Pole sect, there is also the fluttering snow city in the northern wilderness. That bunch of monks from the Great Light Temple really wouldn't do something like killing the innocent, and the extreme evil sect also kept a very low profile during that period of time. The number of people killed by the extreme north's floating snow city in the extreme north was even more than the extreme evil sect. After listening to Pang Hu's words, Chu Xiu felt that the old ancestor of the fluttering snow city who was afraid of death was not so bad after all. Instead, he had the potential to be an ambitious person. When he was weak, he kept a low profile and endured. When he was strong, he would use ruthless and decisive means to suppress dissidents. There was nothing wrong with this. If it were Chu Xiu, he would do the same. It was just that the other party's means of struggling to survive was something that Chu Xiu could not agree with. Chapter 717. The birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was considered a major event in the Northern Yen pugilist world, but it wasn't considered a major event. It was considered a major event because of the identity of the Northern Drifts Now City. Not to mention the Northern Wilderness, even in the entire Northern Yen pugilist world, the Northern Drifts Now City was considered a first-class major force. And it wasn't considered a major event because the birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was a little too frequent. A martial Dao grandmaster had a lifespan of 300 years, and a true fire spirit refinement realm expert had a lifespan of 400 years. Although this was only in theory, most of them could live up to 200 or 300 years. With such a long lifespan, how could it be possible for them to celebrate their birthdays so frequently? Therefore, they would only invite their friends to celebrate their 100th, 200th, or 188th birthday. But the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was different. Not long after he started his secluded cultivation, he began to celebrate his birthday every 10 years, causing some of the major forces in the northern wilderness to suffer greatly. Since it was a birthday celebration, they had to send some gifts no matter what. If they didn't bring enough gifts, not only would they be embarrassed, they were also afraid that the Northern Drifts Now City would bear a grudge against them. So in the beginning, they tried every possible means to find gifts for the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City, but later on, they discovered that they couldn't afford to send any gifts, so they could only reduce the value of the gifts. Moreover, the Northern Drifts Now City didn't say anything about it. Only then did everyone feel relieved and began to participate in the birthday celebration. And they also discovered that the birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City didn't seem to be for the sake of making money, but just to show off the status of the Northern Drifts Now City. So for the Northern Drifts Now City's actions, although the other sects were puzzled, no one dared to say anything. After all, the strength and status of the Northern Drifts Now City was clearly displayed, as long as they were happy. When Chu Xiu's group arrived outside the Northern Drifts Now City, the originally deserted Northern Drifts Now City was now incomparably lively, with many cultivators coming and going. Mei Qinglian and Pang, who might not be acquainted with each other, but in the entire Northern Yen region, there weren't many who didn't know who Chu Xiu was. Seeing Chu Xiu's group of 3 arrive, everyone present, whether it was from the far north's drifting snow city or the other cultivators who came to attend the birthday celebration, all revealed strange expressions. The Drifts Now City of the extreme north had a grudge with Chu Xiu. This was something many people knew. But now, Chu Xiu actually appeared here openly. No matter how one looked at it, it was clear that he came with ill intentions. Moreover, Chu Xiu's notoriety in the Northern Yen Kingdom was very great. He often chose to kill people on their joyous days, as if he wanted them to experience the emotions of great joy and great sorrow. He was extremely ruthless. Now, he also chose such a day to come to the Drifts Now City of the extreme north. Could it be that he also had some opinions about the Drifts Now City of the extreme north? However, although everyone didn't have a good impression of Chu Xiu, but with Chu Xiu's status and the status of the Jianghu Hall, there were many patriarchs and sect masters of small forces who greeted Chu Xiu politely. At this time, the Drifts Now City of the extreme north also received the news that Chu Xiu would come in person on such a day. Of course, they couldn't drive Chu Xiu out, so they had to come to welcome him, and they also sent people of high status. Official Chu, how come you have time to come to my Drifts Now City of the extreme north? I hope you don't take offense for not going out to welcome you. A middle-aged man in his 40s with a slender figure walked out, with a fake smile on his face, and made an inviting gesture to Chu Xiu. Regarding the information of the Drifts Now City of the extreme north, Chu Xiu had also learned about it. This person was also a direct descendant of the Bai family of the Drifts Now City of the extreme north, Bai Hanfeng. He also had the strength of a martial arts master. The martial arts masters of the older generation of the Bai family were almost all dead. They were all people of the same generation as the old ancestor of the Drifts Now City of the extreme north, and some were even his juniors. In the end, they didn't survive the old ancestor and died first. And this generation of the Bai family was obviously not as talented as the previous generation. There were only a few who were qualified to step into the realm of martial arts master. Bai Hantian was the first to step into the realm of martial arts master and became the city lord. Bai Hanfeng didn't appear in the Jianghu after stepping into the realm of martial arts master, but he had been serving the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north. Chu Xiu smiled and said, I heard that the birthday of the Bai family's old ancestor of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north is such a joyous day. Even if the Drifts Now city of the extreme north didn't invite me, I still have to come. Bai Hanfeng's mouth twitched, and he coughed and said, Official Chu, you misunderstood. Everyone knows that Official Chu, you established the Jianghu Hall and are very busy every day. Our Bai family is a little sorry to trouble you for such a small matter, so we didn't invite you. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said with a smile, It doesn't matter. Even if you didn't invite me, I still came. By the way, bring the congratulatory gift. Mei Qingnian looked at Chu Xiu with a look that said, Are you kidding me? What congratulatory gift did they prepare? Chu Xiu patted his head and said, I forgot, the congratulatory gift is here with me. As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out a bottle of medicinal pills and threw it to Bai Hanfeng. He said, The Jianghu Hall's secret medicinal pill, the green dragon emu wood heaven returning life transformation pill. The Bai family's old ancestor is so old, it's inevitable that there will be some bumps and bruises. My gift of medicinal pills is sincere, right? Bai Hanfeng's face suddenly turned black. There were people who gave gifts of medicinal pills, but they all gave medicinal pills for cultivation. What was the meaning of giving a healing pill? Moreover, how was this medicinal pill the green dragon emu wood heaven returning life transformation pill? It was clearly a third revolution medicinal pill, the blood recovery pill. There were 3 big words written on the bottle. Did you think I was blind? Bai Hanfeng was so angry that he trembled. However, on such a day, he couldn't fall out with Chu Xiu. So he could only say with a black face, Official Chu, please come in. Chu Xiu laughed twice, but he didn't continue to provoke him. Instead, he led his people into the city. The exterior of the northern floating snow city seemed to be paved with ice bricks, but the interior was extremely luxurious. All the buildings were carved beams and painted pillars, and the decorations were gilded. It was comparable to the imperial palace. The northern floating snow city had flourished for thousands of years in the north. Naturally, it had its own heritage. Before the northern Yan city, the northern floating snow city stood tall in the northern wilderness. After so many generations of development, it was normal that it was more luxurious than the imperial palace. Chu Xiu and the others were strolling around, while Bai Hanfeng had already gone to find Bai Hantian with a black face. City Lord, Chu Xiu came with ill intentions. He is clearly here to provoke us. Bai Hantian said indifferently, It's true that he is here to provoke us. But don't worry, he won't make a move here. If he really wanted to make a move on the northern floating snow city, he wouldn't have brought so few people with him. Our northern floating snow city is not the giant spirit gang. No matter how bold Chu Xiu is, he wouldn't be this bold. Go and greet the guests first. I'll go meet him and see what he's up to. As he spoke, Bai Hantian walked out and headed straight for Chu Xiu. When the martial artists along the way saw Bai Hantian's aggressive appearance, they subconsciously made way for him, as if they were watching a show. Walking in front of Chu Xiu, Bai Hantian looked around and said in a deep voice, Official Chu, let's talk in private. You don't want to be treated like a monkey in public, right? Chu Xiu nodded and said, City Lord Bai, please lead the way. Bai Hantian didn't say anything. He brought Chu Xiu to a reception room and closed the door. He said coldly, Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do by coming to my northern floating snow city? Don't treat my northern floating snow city like the giant spirit gang. This is not a place where you can behave atrociously. My northern floating snow city doesn't care about what you've done in the northern Yan. But the condition is that you don't provoke my northern floating snow city. Chu Xiu said indifferently, City Lord Bai, don't be so agitated. No matter what, you and I are people who have fought side by side, aren't we? Bai Hantian snorted coldly. He knew that Chu Xiu was referring to the battle with the morgue. He had gone back on his word and schemed against Chu Xiu and Nie Renlong to kill each other. However, Bai Hantian didn't think that he had done anything wrong. If it weren't for Chu Xiu's luck, Nie Renlong and Chu Xiu would have perished together. Sitting opposite Bai Hantian, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I won't keep you in suspense, City Lord Bai. I'm not here to cause trouble for your northern floating snow city. I'm here on His Imperial Majesty's orders to discuss something with you." Hearing that this matter involved the Northern Yen Imperial Court, Bai Hantian couldn't help but frown. What is it? It's very simple. His Imperial Majesty is preparing to station troops in the Northern Yen. When the time comes, I hope that City Lord Bai will cooperate. Chu Xiu said slowly. Bai Hantian immediately stood up and shouted angrily, "Impossible. What is the Imperial Court trying to do? Are they trying to suppress my northern floating snow city?" In the entire northern wastelands, the Great Light Temple and the Evil Poles sect were located in the deepest part of the northern wastelands. It was a desolate and cold land with a radius of hundreds of miles. Only the northern floating snow city's territory was considered close to the northern Yan's Liaodong County. If the northern Yen were to station troops in the northern wastelands, it would be like putting a layer of shackles on the northern floating snow city. It wouldn't feel good. Seeing Bai Hantian's expression, Chu Xiu didn't find it strange at all. It would be strange if Bai Hantian agreed to such a sensitive matter. Chu Xiu simply said, "City Lord Bai, you're thinking too much. To put it bluntly, your northern floating snow city isn't weak, but it's not to the point where the Northern Yen Imperial Court would go out of their way to suppress it. The one the Imperial Court wants to suppress is the one behind your northern floating snow city." The Great Light Temple? Bai Hantian frowned. Yes, the Great Light Temple. However, the Great Light Temple is located in the northern wastelands. The Northern Yen Imperial Court can't bypass your northern floating snow city and station troops there. Therefore, they can only find a place near your northern floating snow city. I advise you to agree to this matter because His Majesty only sent me here to discuss this with you. If you don't agree, forget about the suppression hall. Can you withstand the pressure from the entire Northern Yen Imperial Court? Bai Hantian's eyes were gloomy as he looked at Chu Xiu and said, "Are you threatening me?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "It's not a threat, it's just a fact. I have an agreement with the Great Light Temple that I won't make a move for the time being. However, the suppression hall belongs to the Imperial Court after all. If His Majesty wants me to make a move, I can't refuse. Therefore, City Lord Bai, I'm not threatening you. I just hope that you won't force me to make a move." Chapter 718. Chu Xiu's attitude infuriated Bai Hantian, but he did not fall out with Chu Xiu on the spot. After all, it was elder ancestor Bai's birthday celebration. Chu Xiu could deliberately provoke and stir up trouble here, but he could not ignore it. Chu Xiu stood up and said in a relaxed manner, "Governor Bai, let me be honest with you. I don't have to do this, it all depends on the Imperial Court. You know my background. I'm working with the Northern Yen Imperial Court, but I'm not a member of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. I just want a stable place to live. But in the pugilistic world, there's nothing I can do. It's the same in the Imperial Court. If the Imperial Court wants me to do it, I can't disobey. If you agree, everyone can relax. If you don't, even I can't guarantee the consequences." With that, Chu Xiu turned and left, leaving Bai Hantian alone with an uncertain expression. Outside, Mei Qinglian asked in a low voice, "Bai Hantian rejected you?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course he rejected me. It would be strange if he agreed. Anyway, Xiang Long only asked me to negotiate with the drifting snow city. Whether it succeeds or fails in the end, it's not my business. Jinwu Hall is only responsible for killing people. I don't have the leisure to be Xiang Long's negotiator." As for the Northern Yen garrison in the drifting snow city, Chu Xiu was not very enthusiastic. Previously, because Chu Xiu had just arrived in the Northern Yen, Jianghu Hall needed to establish a foothold in the northern Yan lands and make a name for themselves. That was why he took the initiative to plot against the giant spirit gang, stirring up trouble in the northern Yan martial arts world, all to establish the prestige and status of Jianghu Hall. But now? Jianghu Hall already had the prestige and status, and this matter was just a whim of Xianglong's. Why did he have to work so hard? Maybe after he ran into a wall here, Xianglong wouldn't force him anymore. After half a day, Elder Ancestor Bai's birthday celebration officially began. In fact, the birthday party had been held many times. It was just the martial arts forces present eating, drinking, and communicating with each other. The big forces were fighting and scheming against each other, and the small forces were currying favor with each other. It was very boring. Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and Pang Hu found a spot near the front and began to gorge themselves on the food. Mei Qinglian was a woman, so she could be considered reserved. Chu Xiu was a man of status, so his table manners could be considered refined. Only Pang Hu was truly bold, completely using the same boldness he had when he was in Chilean Stockade Village to eat large pieces of meat and drink large bowls of wine. Of course, although those who disliked Pang Hu didn't say anything, no one dared to say anything. Although everyone knew that the 36 great bandits of the northern land were gone, the Chilean stockade was not a force to be trifled with. Moreover, Pang Hu seemed to be with Chu Xiu now, which made them even more afraid to say anything. However, the martial artists from the northern fluttering snow city who were serving at the side pointed at Chu Xiu's table hesitantly, stuttering. "My lords, your seats, Pang Hu said unhappily. "What's wrong? Isn't a birthday celebration just about eating and drinking? Can't I eat here?" "Oh right, your chickens are not bad, give me 2 more." The disciple did not dare to say anything else, so he ran to the kitchen to get the chickens. After a while, there was a sudden sound from outside, followed by the sound of plates falling to the ground and shattering. Looking back, it was the disciple who went to the kitchen to get the chickens. He was slapped, and the 2 plates of chickens in his hands fell to the ground. A young man in his 30s, dressed in white, pointed at the disciple and scolded, "What are you doing? Don't you know the rules? Don't you know where my seat is? Why did someone else take it?" Looking at his behavior, Pang Hu finally understood why the disciple was stuttering just now. It turned out that they had taken someone else's seat. During the birthday banquet, the seats at the front were all reserved for those with status. The Drift Snow city of the extreme north basically didn't expect Chu Xiu and the others would come. Hence, they naturally wouldn't arrange seats for them. The disciple from before had not been disrespectful at all. Seeing that he had suffered a slap and even caused him to be unable to get the chicken dinner, Pang Hu immediately stood up and said coldly, "Brat, it's me who took your seat. What, are you not satisfied?" Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian were eating at the side, too lazy to even look. The young man's strength was not bad. He had reached the physical invulnerability stage in his 30s. But it was a pity that he and Chu Xiu were people from 2 different worlds. If he were to deal with such a small character himself, it would be too degrading. It would be better to let Pang Hu handle it. The young man looked at Pang Hu and frowned. "Senior, the seats were arranged by the servants. It's fine if you took them, but I'm teaching them a lesson. What has that got to do with you?" Hearing this, Chu Xiu raised his head slightly. The background of this young man was not ordinary. After Pang Hu stood up, if he were to admit defeat, he would be a good-for-nothing. And if he were to be so brainless as to argue with Pang Hu, he would be a brainless fool. But after seeing Pang Hu's strength, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. In fact, what he said made sense. It was true that Chu Xiu and the others had taken his seat, but they did not do it in front of him. Hence, he was only teaching a lesson to a servant who did not make proper arrangements. Most importantly, he was teaching a servant from the fluttering snow city of the far north a lesson. Even if you beat a dog, you had to look at its master. To teach a servant from the fluttering snow city of the far north a lesson in their territory, either the other party was very familiar with the fluttering snow city, or the other party was very strong, to the point where he could go head-on against the fluttering snow city. Pang Hu scratched his head and said, "Kid, you're pretty good with words. But I don't know if your master has taught you before, but don't talk so much nonsense when talking to your seniors. If I say that I'm right, then I'm right. If I say that I'm wrong, then I'm wrong." As soon as he finished speaking, the aura around Pang Hu suddenly became incomparably strong, and a wave of pressure enveloped the young man. With Pang Hu's strength in the martial Dao realm, the pressure of this aura was enough to force him to his knees. But at this moment, a figure blocked in front of the young man and snorted coldly, "What kind of ability is it to only dare to show off in front of a junior?" The person blocking in front of Pang Hu was a middle-aged man with a burly figure and a cold expression. With a casual slash of his hand, the saber-intent soared into the sky, as if it could split the heavens and the earth. His slash was bold and unparalleled. Even though he did not have a saber in his hand, he still exuded a sharp aura. Pang Hu did not expect such a person to suddenly jump out. In a moment of carelessness, he was pushed back by the saber aura. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Pang Hu. He casually stretched out a hand and crushed the saber aura. Although the saber aura had already been expended quite a bit when it was slashing at Pang Hu, it was still shocking enough that Chu Xiu could crush it with a single hand. Pang Hu's face showed a hint of anger. Just as he was about to attack, he was stopped by Chu Xiu. Looking at the middle-aged man, Chu Xiu said lightly, "What's wrong with the junior? The junior doesn't know the rules, so he needs to be taught a lesson. If there's no seat, you find it yourself. Do you really think you're someone important and insist on sitting in the front row?" The middle-aged martial artist frowned and said, "Chu Xiu, this time you took our seat first. We don't want to cause trouble, but don't go too far. Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you've become the governor of the Jianghu Hall. The dignity of the imperial court is not for you to use." When Chu Xiu heard his tone, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, "You're from the Northern Yan Imperial Court?" The middle-aged man was also stunned. A hint of anger emerged on his face as he said, "You don't know me?" From his tone, it was as if it was a crime for Chu Xiu not to know him. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Why should I know you?" The middle-aged man said coldly, "I'm the general of the Northern Guard Army, Ren Qianli." The Northern Yan National 5 armies were basically the strongest force in the Northern Yan military, just like the West Hill Army under Xiang Wu's control. This Ren Qianli was actually the general of the Northern Guard Army, one of the 5 armies. His status was enough to rank in the top 5 of the entire Northern Yan military. But to be honest, besides Xiang Wu, he really didn't know much about the Northern Yan military. Chu Xiu was only cooperating with the Northern Yan military. He had never said that he would be loyal to Xianglong. The Jianghu Hall was only in charge of the Jianghu, not the imperial court. Therefore, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to know about the Northern Yan military. Anyway, it had nothing to do with him. But what did the Northern Yan military mean by appearing here? Could it be that Xianglong had sent someone else? Chu Xiu didn't think too much about it. He said faintly, "So it's General Ren. My apologies for not recognizing you. But General Ren, you better remember one thing. You are the general of the Northern Guard Army, and I am also the viceroy of the Jianghu Hall. According to Her Majesty, you and I are of the same rank. If you want to teach me a lesson, other than Her Majesty, you are not qualified." Ren Qianli's eyes revealed a touch of coldness. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Bai Hantian, who had rushed over. "Sir Ren, calm down. It's just a seat. I will arrange it. Today is the great ancestor's birthday. It won't be good for anyone if things get out of hand." Ren Qianli snorted coldly and was pulled away by Bai Hantian. Chu Xiu sat back down. Mei Qinglian chuckled and said, "As the viceroy of the Jianghu Hall, you are too incompetent. You can't even recognize the general of the 5 armies of the Northern Yan National 5 armies." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Ever since I became the viceroy, I haven't been idle at all. Where would I find the time to look at their information? Why? Do you have some understanding of them? Tell me about them. Mei Qinglian said, I don't know much about them, but I have read some information. In any case, they are better than you. This person is a veteran of the Northern Yan military. However, he wasn't groomed by the imperial court. Instead, he is from the pugilistic world. However, he is not from a sect or an aristocratic family. His master, Empty Valley Master Fang Jinwu, is a famous figure in the Northern Yan pugilistic world. He is very experienced and has some friendship with the great ancestor of the Northern Floating Snow City. His appearance here is probably not on behalf of the imperial court. Chapter 719. Throughout the history of the Jianghu, those who could become martial Dao grandmasters as rogue cultivators were few and far between, and those who could achieve the true fire spirit refinement state were even rarer. Fang Jinwu was one of them, and Chu Xiu had heard of his name. This person was neither good nor evil, and it was said that he had a rough background. In his early years, he dominated the Northern Yan pugilistic world. He was slightly younger than the old ancestor of the Northern Floating Snow City, but he was already over 300 years old, and his blood and qi were declining. When he was old, Fang Jinwu went into seclusion in the Empty Valley in the south of Yan Kingdom. That was how he got the title of Empty Valley Lord. However, Fang Jinwu was only in closed-door seclusion. He wasn't like the old ancestor of the Drifts Now City in the extreme north, who was simply using all sorts of methods to drag out an ignoble existence. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, Ren Xianli is a disciple that Fang Jinwu took in after he went into seclusion. He is extremely talented and took less than 30 years to step into the realm of a martial arts grandmaster. And because his master is not from a sect or family, the Northern Yan imperial court is very confident in him. With his military exploits, he was promoted to a high position. Also, because he is half a member of the pugilistic world, before you came, Ren Xianli was in charge of almost all the pugilistic world affairs in the Northern Yan. The young man just now should be Ren Xianli's junior, Chen Jinting. I heard that Fang Jinwu accepted another young man as his disciple in recent years, so it should be Chen Jinting. So, I was the one who blocked his path. No wonder he felt that Ren Xianli seemed to be very hostile towards him. Now it seemed that Ren Xianli had been unhappy with him for a long time. Of course, Chu Xiu didn't care. There were many people in the pugilistic world who disliked him, and he didn't care about Ren Xianli. At this time, Bai Wuji walked straight to Chu Xiu and stood beside Chu Xiu. Official Chu, long time no see. Bai Wuji's voice was a little sad. Chu Xiu didn't expect that Bai Wuji would take the initiative to greet him. Chu Xiu and Bai Wuji were old acquaintances, they had known each other since they were still in the Xiantian realm. However, not to mention Chu Xiu, who had already jumped out of the dragon and tiger list, Bai Wuji couldn't even be compared to Xie Xiaolu and the others. After cultivating for so long, Bai Wuji had only just reached the 5 Qis gathering origin stage, and his battle prowess had not been tempered yet, so his battle prowess couldn't be considered too strong. So now that they were in 2 different worlds, Chu Xiu didn't even bother to look for trouble with Bai Wuji. Of course, that was if Bai Wuji didn't mess with him. Seeing that Bai Wuji wasn't hostile, Chu Xiu nodded, yes, it has indeed been a long time. Bai Wuji raised his cup and toasted Chu Xiu, Brother Chu, you and I did have some conflicts in the past, but at that time, we were both young and full of vigor. After so many years, I've come to accept it. The grudges we had when we were young are really laughable. In our generation, you and the young celestial master have both stepped out of the dragon and tiger list, your future is limitless. It is sad to be born in the same generation as you two, but at the same time, it is also a blessing. Let's drink. With that, Bai Wuji took a step forward and toasted to Chu Xiu again, then turned around and left. Mei Qinglian was surprised, oh, this Bai clan's kid seems to understand. It's not easy. Chu Xiu drank a cup of wine and secretly gave Mei Qinglian a piece of paper. There were no words written on it, but if you looked closely, you would see that it was written with an extremely meticulous internal force, and it would disappear after a while. There was only one sentence written on the paper, and it looked like it was written in a hurry. Brother Chu, save me. I am willing to give you the whereabouts of the yin and yang sorrowful poem in exchange for Brother Chu's help. When Bai Wuji walked towards him and said those words, he felt something was wrong, because it didn't seem like Bai Wuji's style. Bai Wuji didn't have many flaws, his only flaw was that he was too arrogant. Back in the northern Yan, he looked down on Chu Xiu and even Nie Donglu. Later, when he came to the Jianghu, he thought that the people on the dragon and tiger list were all mediocre. It wasn't until he was severely defeated by Shen Bai's sword that his temper stabilized a little. However, the words he said just now didn't seem like something Bai Wuji would say. It wasn't until he drank the last cup of wine and Bai Wuji handed him the paper, that Chu Xiu was sure that his guess was right. Bai Wuji really had some problems, some concerns, and even to the point that he didn't dare to say it out loud. The contents of the paper must have been hastily written down after seeing Chu Xiu. There were only two thoughts in the paper, one was to save him, and the other was that as long as Chu Xiu saved him, Chu Wuji would give him the whereabouts of one of the great sorrowful poems of yin and yang in exchange. As for what kind of crisis he encountered in the northern floating snow city, and how he wanted Bai Wuji to save him, the paper didn't say anything, or rather, Bai Wuji didn't have the time to write so many things. Mei Qinglian was flabbergasted as she transmitted her voice. What do you mean? Chu Xiu's face had an unfathomable smile. I don't know what it means, but I do know that it's very interesting. Initially, he thought that coming to the northern floating snow city was just a formality. Who would have thought that he would encounter such an interesting matter? What secret was the northern floating snow cities by clan hiding exactly? At this moment, Bai Hanfeng noticed Bai Wuji's actions. He couldn't help but frown. City Lord, why is Wuji looking for Chu Xiu? Could he be thinking of something bad? Bai Hantian calmly replied, seeing a genius like Chu Xiu, he's just feeling a little emotional. Don't worry, since he's my son, and also the successor that the northern floating snow city nurtured with all their resources, he should be willing to pay the price for the sake of the northern floating snow city. For the sake of the greater picture, he should know what to do. Bai Hanfeng sighed and shook his head. If it wasn't for the greater picture, the northern floating snow city wouldn't be willing to sacrifice such a talented genius like Bai Wuji. It's almost time. City Lord, let's begin. Bai Hanfeng spoke. Bai Hantian nodded his head. He then stood up and spoke to the crowd in a low voice. Everyone, this isn't the first time that our Drifts Now city has come to offer our well wishes. However, we still have to express our gratitude. Our Drifts Now city truly thanks everyone for their support. Some of the people present listened attentively, while others secretly rolled their eyes. You also know that this isn't the first time you're offering your well wishes? Why must you do this? Must you wait until the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city dies? However, the people present didn't say anything. This could be considered as giving Bai Hantian some face. At this moment, Bai Hantian was still feeling very good about himself. He paused for a moment before continuing. However, the birthday celebration this time around is different from the past. It's the 400th birthday of my old ancestor. Hence, when everyone departs, my northern floating snow city will also present a gift to all of you. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned. In the past, they would always send gifts. But this time around, the northern floating snow city was finally generous and changed to a gift. Next, I would like to invite the old ancestor to say a few words. Bai Hantian waved his hands as someone opened up a gate. Instantly, a wave of extreme coldness gushed forth. This was none other than the aura of the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city. The pressure of a true fire expert at the spirit refinement realm didn't seem to be weakened at all. For so many years, the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city didn't even show his face once. In fact, when some major events happened in the past, he would always sit in the Drifts Now city. This also caused many people to secretly laugh at the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city. A true fire spirit refinement realm expert was actually so cowardly. But from the looks of it now, although the old ancestor was cowardly, at the very least, it was effective. If the old ancestor was more aggressive in his actions and caused his early death, the northern floating snow city would no longer have a true fire spirit refinement realm expert guarding it. Their prestige would definitely be much lower than it was now. This old man can't thank everyone enough for attending this old man's birthday celebration. After living for 400 years, this old man has seen too many things. Now, if I can live for another year, I will count it as another year. Whether or not I can meet everyone in the next 10 years is still an unknown. If it's not convenient for this old man to meet everyone knows that. Hence, I can only thank everyone here for coming. Someone immediately said, "Old senior, please live for 10,000 years. Please don't say such inauspicious words." The old ancestor of the northern floating snow city chuckled, living for 10,000 years? Old ancestor doesn't have the extravagant hope of living for that long. Alright, this old man won't say anything more. Everyone, please do as you please. As the sound of his voice faded, the pressure of the true fire spirit refinement realm disappeared. This caused everyone to heave a sigh of relief. Chu Xiu's brows twitched. He suddenly felt a little awkward. The true fire spirit refinement realm pressure was real, but why did he feel that this old ancestor of the northern floating snow city was a little cocky? Everyone had the pressure of a martial artist. Generally speaking, this kind of pressure would only be obvious when one reached the realm of unity of heaven and man. However, whether it was a martial artist at the realm of unity of heaven and man or a martial Dao grandmaster like Chu Xiu, as long as they were not at daggers drawn and facing the enemy, who would be so bored as to always expose their pressure? Did they have to show off their status as an expert at the realm of unity of heaven and man or a martial Dao grandmaster? Perhaps there were such weirdos in the pugilistic world. However, the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city had already reached the true fire spirit refinement realm, and yet he was still so cocky. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that it was a little childish. At this moment, Bai Hantian said in a deep voice, "According to the rules, every time the old ancestor's birthday celebration, there will be an outstanding disciple who will be taught by the old ancestor. Among the young people of this generation, my son Bai Wuji is the undisputed #1 in the younger generation of the northern floating snow city. So this time, there is no need for a competition to choose the candidate. Let Wuji be the one." As soon as he said this, some of the young disciples of the northern floating snow city revealed looks of envy and jealousy. At the same time, they were a little unconvinced, thinking that Bai Hantian was abusing his power for personal gain. He actually cancelled the competition and let his son be taught by the old ancestor. That was a powerhouse at the true fire spirit refinement realm. A casual word of advice from the old ancestor would be enough for them to eat for the rest of their lives. No one noticed that when Bai Wuji walked up, his eyes were looking in the direction of Chu Xiu. There was a hint of pleading in his eyes. Chapter 720. Based on Chu Xiu's personality, he didn't like to meddle in other people's business. If it was any other sect, he would just treat it as a joke. But this time, it was the northern floating snow city, and Bai Wuji said he knew the whereabouts of the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang. This was something Chu Xiu couldn't ignore. Although he didn't know if the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang that Bai Wuji knew was the one he wanted. After all, the sorrowful poem had been scattered throughout the pugilistic world, and everyone might have a copy of it. Just like the annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist, it should be the most widely spread of the 7 sorrowful poems. Many in the Eastern Qi army practiced this technique. But looking at Bai Wuji's expression, it was obvious that he couldn't tell Chu Xiu what the technique was. It was up to Chu Xiu to ask for it himself. So at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly stood up and said, "Governor Bai, I have admired Senior Bai for a long time and would like to pay him a visit. I would like to go with Brother Bai." When Bai Wuji saw Chu Xiu step forward, a look of relief appeared in his eyes. On the other hand, Bai Hantian's expression changed slightly. Bai Hantian coughed and said, "Ever since the great ancestor went into seclusion a few decades ago, he has never received any guests. Even during the birthday celebration, he would only say a few words, so I hope Lord Chu will be magnanimous enough to forgive me." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Governor Bai, this doesn't make sense. It's fine if he doesn't receive guests under normal circumstances, but since Brother Bai wants to enter and receive guidance from Senior Bai, he must speak to him. What? Brother Bai can see him, but I can't. Is the elder ancestor of the Bai clan, an expert in the true fire spirit ascension realm that can't be seen? Bai Hantian's face darkened, and he said in a cold voice, Chu Xiu. What do you mean by that? How dare you insult my elder in my floating snow city? Do you have a death wish? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Governor Bai, don't be so angry. I've already said that I just want to meet the elder ancestor. Is it that difficult? Bai Hantian waved his hand and said, Our elder ancestor does not receive guests. Chu Xiu took a step forward and said, What elder ancestor does not receive guests? Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded. Why did they suddenly quarrel? Why was Chu Xiu so insistent on meeting elder ancestor Bai? Just as the atmosphere was at daggers drawn, Chen Jinting, who had previously clashed with Chu Xiu, suddenly stood up and said, Lord Chu's words are somewhat unreasonable. It's their business whether they want to meet or not. I've heard of forced buying and selling, but I've never heard of forcing people to meet. What an interesting hobby. Everyone turned to look at Chen Jinting. They wanted to see who had the guts to rub Chu Xiu's whiskers. When they saw that this person was Chen Jinting, everyone had a look of understanding on their faces. Chen Jinting was not famous in the Northern Yan pugilistic world. He was not old, but he was not young either. He did not have any notable achievements, so he was not even on the Longhu leaderboard. However, his master, Fang Jinwu, was known by everyone in the Northern Yan pugilistic world. There were very few martial Dao masters who were rogue cultivators, and true fire spirit ascension realm powerhouses who were rogue cultivators were even rarer. Even the first seat of the Great Light Temple would pay him a visit when he passed by the empty valley. They were very polite. Chen Jinting was Fang Jinwu's disciple, and given Fang Jinwu's age, he would not be able to take in any other disciples. Therefore, Chen Jinting was almost like a closed-door disciple. His status was not ordinary. He might not be comparable to Chu Xiu, but at least he would not be afraid of Chu Xiu. Ren Qinli wanted to pull Chen Jinting back, but he failed to do so. He could only stand beside Chen Jinting and guard against Chu Xiu's sudden attack. Others might not know Chu Xiu, but Ren Qinli had studied Chu Xiu's information in detail. This person was a little crazy. When others thought he would not attack, he would attack. He could not be understood with common sense. Chu Xiu looked at Chen Jinting and said with narrowed eyes, One must know one's limits. Do you know why you're not on the Longhu leaderboard even though your background is not bad? Although Chen Jinting knew that nothing good would come out of Chu Xiu's mouth, he could not help but ask, why? As martial arts practitioners of the younger generation, both Zhang Qingjin and Chu Xiu stood at the peak of their peers. However, the envy, jealousy, and hatred that Chu Xiu received was more than Zhang Qingjin's. The reason was simple. Zhang Qingjin had been famous for too long. Even from the moment he was born, he had been shrouded in a halo. Therefore, when Zhang Qingjin was young, he had already endured all the envy, jealousy, and hatred. Now, everyone was even used to it. No matter what unexpected breakthrough Zhang Qingjin made, everyone felt that it was very normal. This was because he was Zhang Qingjin. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, was different. Although he was a martial arts practitioner from the Yinma clan, everyone in the martial arts world knew that he was actually born in the wilderness. Among the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, no one was born lower than him. Moreover, Chu Xiu was a dark horse, surpassing many of the elites on the Longhu leaderboard. He even surpassed Zhong Xian, who had been thought to be able to compete with Zhang Qingjin, and stepped into the realm of martial arts master. This was very surprising. The result of his reputation and strength rising too quickly was that Chu Xiu would inevitably face the suspicion and subconscious hostility of many people. This was the case for Chen Jinting. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes at Chen Jinting and sneered, It's very simple. It's all because you're a piece of trash. Chen Jinting's face immediately showed a hint of anger. He could be considered to have become a monk halfway through his life. He only started cultivating martial arts when he was in his teens, and it only took him a little more than 10 years to step into the three-flower realm. This was already very impressive. Moreover, how could someone who was chosen by Fang Jinwu, a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement realm, and accepted as a disciple, be a piece of trash? Chu Xiu continued to sneer. The path of martial arts is to move forward alone with unparalleled sharpness. Which famous martial artist hasn't gone through countless trials? Which one of them hasn't fought through mountains of blades and seas of blood? What gave you the courage to say this to Master Pang just now? Was it because of your pitiful little bit of strength? Wasn't it because of your master's reputation and strength? Now you have the guts to talk nonsense in front of me. What gives you the right? Do you think I can't afford to offend your master? A guy who only dares to talk nonsense because of his master is nothing but a piece of trash. Chen Jinting's face flushed after hearing Chu Xiu's words. It was so red that it looked like blood was about to drip out. Chu Xiu's words could be said to stab him in the heart. Although that was what he really thought, he was unwilling to admit it. Taking a step toward Chen Jinting, Chu Xiu's aura was condensed to the extreme. Majestic demonic qi mixed with boundless blood qi attacked Chen Jinting. It was just the aura alone, but it gave people a suffocating feeling of terror. Compared to the true fire spirit refinement realm's aura of the Bai family's elder ancestor, although Chu Xiu's aura was not as powerful as the true fire spirit refinement realms, his aura was more real and terrifying. In comparison, some people even felt that the aura of the Bai family's elder ancestor was a little fake. Ren Qianli's expression changed slightly. He moved and stood directly in front of Chen Jinting. He formed a seal with both hands and a vast and pure earth energy erupted from his body. He was as still as a mountain and firmly blocked Chu Xiu's powerful aura. Although he looked calm, in reality, there was a hint of shock in Ren Qianli's eyes. The moment he blocked Chu Xiu's aura, he seemed to have seen a boundless sea of blood with countless evil spirits wailing and screaming in it. This made Ren Qianli extremely shocked. How many people did Chu Xiu kill to be able to condense such a terrifying aura? Behind Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian frowned slightly. She had also witnessed Chu Xiu's rise from the bottom. Therefore, Mei Qinglian was more familiar with Chu Xiu than anyone else. She clearly remembered that although Chu Xiu's aura was fierce, it was different from what it was now. Now, Chu Xiu's aura was so strong that it made her heart palpitate indescribably. However, she felt that the power was very unfamiliar, as if it did not belong to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't realize these things. He simply said to Ren Qianli faintly, "General Ren, this has nothing to do with you. Since you are here to offer your blessings, then do it well. Just take care of your junior brother and don't be a busybody." Ren Qianli did not say anything, but his eyes flashed with a deep sense of fear. Ren Qianli pulled Chen Jinting aside and secretly transmitted a message to him. He scolded, "Junior. What did I tell you before? Even if Master is around, don't stir up trouble in the underworld. After all, Master is a rogue cultivator. He is alone and does not have the backing of a big sect. Now that Master is around, you can be more relaxed. However, if one day Master is gone, what will you do? I want to protect you, but the underworld is so big, and there is more than one existence that I can't afford to provoke. Take Chu Xiu for example. In the imperial court, he is the viceroy of Jianghu Hall personally appointed by Her Majesty. He is also on good terms with General Xiangwu of the West Hill Army. In the underworld, he is the successor of the Yinma clan. Do you know how much power the Yinma clan has hidden in the dark? Even Master is not willing to provoke them easily." Chen Jinting lowered his head as his eyes revealed a wisp of unwillingness, and he only explained, "I just can't stand the sight of Chu Xiu being so arrogant and overbearing. Moreover, he's the one who snatched senior brother's position. Her Majesty established the Jianghu Hall to find someone who has deep connections with the underworld to be the viceroy. No matter how I look at it, this person should be you, senior. In the end, your position was snatched by Chu Xiu. Why? Ren Xinli snorted and said, I don't need you to stand up for me in my matters. Just take care of yourself. Remember, don't talk too much later. Chapter 721. Chen Jinting had little experience in the Jianghu and was easily swayed by his own emotions. However, Ren Xinli was a veteran of the Jianghu. Furthermore, he had gained experience in the imperial court and fought with others. He could already tell that something was wrong with the current situation. It was best to watch the show and try not to get involved. Seeing that Chu Xiu was looking at him again, Bai Hantian immediately said, Everyone, the birthday celebration is over. The elder ancestor is preparing to impart martial arts to the younger generation. Please go back. However, Chu Xiu did not leave. Instead, he took a step forward and smiled. What's the hurry? I've already said that as long as I can see Senior Bai, I'll leave immediately. Chu Xiu. You're deliberately looking for trouble. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Hantian waved his hand. Immediately, a large number of disciples from the fluttering snow city rushed out and glared at Chu Xiu and the others. Some of these people were preparing to activate the formation, while others were holding crossbows and pointing them at Chu Xiu and the others. Ordinary crossbows were naturally unable to deal with martial Dao grandmasters. The crossbows in their hands were all specially made with runes carved on them. Although a martial Dao grandmaster could easily destroy or dodge a single crossbow, the power of thousands of crossbow bolts shooting at the same time was still very shocking. Seeing this scene, Peng Hu and Mei Qinglian both looked vigilant and stood beside Chu Xiu. However, at this time, a smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Chu Xiu felt a little strange coming to the birthday celebration of the elder ancestor of the fluttering snow city. Perhaps others were used to it and felt that it was normal, but this time, Chu Xiu felt very awkward. It was not until Bai Wuji secretly sent him a message that Chu Xiu had a vague guess in his heart. Of course, this was only a guess, and Chu Xiu still needed to verify it. If he guessed correctly, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north would be in big trouble. If he guessed wrongly, he would have to face the pursuit of a true fire spirit refinement realm expert. Naturally, Chu Xiu did not dare to fight head-on against an expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, he had survived when he faced Sir God Luo in the past. Now that he was facing an old expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, he naturally had the confidence to escape. However, from the looks of it, he probably wouldn't have the chance to fight with the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse. Chu Xiu had caused such a ruckus here, but in the end, the old ancestor of the northern fluttering snow city still hadn't appeared. This person was either enduring to the extreme, or there was something fishy about it. The more Bai Hantian tried to hide it, the more it looked like he was putting on a strong front. Holding the heavenly demon dance in his hand, Chu Xiu sneered and said, You're right. I'm looking for trouble. Bai Hantian, His Majesty has given you face by asking me to negotiate with you. But in the end, you don't want it. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Originally, Chu Xiu couldn't find an excuse to cause trouble here. Originally, he was prepared to use the grudges of the past as an excuse. However, it just so happened that he thought of the matter with Xiang Long, so he directly said it out. This sentence was very effective. Previously, there were some forces who were on good terms with the Drifts Now city of the extreme north who were ready to intervene. However, as soon as they heard Chu Xiu's words, they immediately gave up on the idea. If this matter had been decided by Chu Xiu himself and he was stirring up trouble here, then they could have acted openly. However, now that the Northern Yan Imperial Court was involved, they had no choice but to be cautious. It was better not to intervene in some matters. When Bai Hantian heard that this was the reason why Chu Xiu was so unforgiving towards the Bai family, he felt a little regretful. Previously, Chu Xiu had already told him that the Imperial Court wanted to station troops in the extreme north. Their main defense was not the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, but the Great Light Temple. However, in that case, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north would also be subject to some restrictions. In addition, he was afraid that it would affect the reputation of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, and the people of the Jianghu would think that he was afraid of Chu Xiu and the imperial court. Therefore, he did not agree for a while. In the end, who would have thought that this Chu Xiu would be crazy enough to directly cause trouble in the Drifts Now city of the extreme north? In desperation, Bai Hantian turned his gaze towards the house where the Bai family's elder ancestor was in seclusion. The door opened once again, and a powerful pressure belonging to the true fire spirit refinement realm descended, several times more violent than before. How dare you? Is the Drifts Now city of the extreme north a place where you can behave atrociously? On account of the fact that you're a member of the imperial court, I'll let you live. Hurry up and scram. At this moment, a strange smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Let me live? Sorry, I'm a stubborn person. I don't like to walk the path of life, but I like to walk the path of death. As soon as he finished speaking, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down, bringing with it a monstrous demonic aura and bloodlust chi that erupted. The demonic nature of this slash was so strong that even the hearts of the people present could not help but tremble. Moreover, the most shocking thing was that this slash of Chu Xiu's was aimed directly at the door where the Bai family's elder ancestor was in seclusion. What was he trying to do? Was he getting too full of himself and preparing to challenge a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement realm? Although everyone present admitted that Chu Xiu's strength was indeed very strong, although he had just stepped into the martial Dao Grand Master realm, for some people, just entering this realm was already the peak. Although Chu Xiu had not yet reached the peak of the martial Dao True Pellet realm, at least he could beat over 80% of the martial artists in the same realm. However, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he was only at the martial Dao True Pellet realm. In the face of a powerhouse at the True Fire Spirit Refinement realm, even if the opponent was a little old, his chances of winning would not be high. To be precise, he, Chu Xiu, would not have a chance of winning. There were only two endings, escaping in a sorry state or being beheaded on the spot. Bai Hantian's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene. He shouted angrily, "Everyone, stop Chu Xiu." As soon as his voice fell, Bai Hantian struck out with his palm. The powerful ice palm force froze everything. Wherever the palm force passed, everything was frozen. The earth energy condensed the water vapor in the air and turned it into an ice dragon, smashing down on Chu Xiu's head. At the same time, countless sword momentum shining with earth energy shrouded Chu Xiu. There were also array patterns shining on the ground, turning into a force that attacked Chu Xiu and the other two. This was the foundation of a big sect. Even if there were no martial Dao Grand Master realm powerhouses, they could block a strong enemy with just some external objects. Help me hold the line. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he directly smashed the ice dragon slash and rushed towards Bai Hantian. Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian were there to help Chu Xiu resist the array and the seemingly endless arrows. This kind of fighting style made Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu very uncomfortable. They would rather charge forward and kill than be besieged by a group of people here. This was the foundation of a big sect. Even if there were no martial Dao Grand Masters, they could still rely on external objects to make the opponent retreat. The last time Bai Hantian saw Chu Xiu was not yet a martial Dao Grand Master. At that time, the scene of him killing Nie Renlong had already left a deep impression on him. Chu Xiu's strongest point was not his saber technique or his internal strength, but Chu Xiu's terrifying explosive power. This kind of explosive power was the most despairing. With such a sudden attack, even if one did not die, they would be seriously injured. At that time, Chu Xiu was able to kill Nie Renlong. Now that Chu Xiu had successfully advanced to the martial Dao True Pellet realm, his strength was even more unfathomable to Bai Hantian. But no matter how unfathomable he was, he still had to make a move. Otherwise, the thousands of years of foundation of the fluttering snow city in the extreme north would be in danger. The cold air was bone-chilling and an icy blue array formation condensed beneath Chu Xiu's feet. As Bai Hantian formed a seal with his hands, Huge icicles appeared beneath his feet like long spears, piercing towards Chu Xiu with boundless sharpness. With the heaven sun gazing at air technique, an attack of this level could not even touch Chu Xiu, and he easily dodged it. However, after the ice spears missed, they exploded directly, exuding a bone-chilling chill that penetrated into Chu Xiu's body, as if it was freezing and stagnating his true qi. Moreover, this kind of power was so evil that Chu Xiu could not get rid of it for a while, and it actually made his movements slower and slower. This was the disadvantage of making a move in someone else's territory. You had no idea how many trump cards the other party had, and how many arrangements they had. On the contrary, your preparation was the least. Bai Hantian took advantage of this opportunity, and the chill in his hands intensified. He stretched out his hand, and the boundless ice aura condensed into an azure blue spear. With a powerful momentum that could shake mountains and rivers, it went straight for Chu Xiu. Form without momentum, the difference is too great. Martial artists who used long weapons like spears and halberds focused on momentum and directly suppressed others with force. Just like Lu Fengxian, when his ancient halberd smashed down, it was as though he was crushing a mountain. Although Luo Feiheng was a woman, her spear technique was also big and domineering. Now Bai Hantian's so-called spear technique was not even comparable to Luo Feiheng. At the moment when the ice spear was about to pierce him, Chu Xiu put away his sword and formed a seal. His body suddenly burned with a scorching Buddhist light. The great sun shifting technique was cast to the extreme by Chu Xiu. In an instant, the qi and blood around his body seemed to be burning, and it directly expelled the cold air. The shadow of Vairocana shone behind Chu Xiu. He put his palms together, and the Buddha's seal fell. The ice spear was directly shattered, and Bai Hantian was also blasted back a few steps, causing his face to flush red. At the same time, Chu Xiu did not stop. He did not continue to attack Bai Hantian, but directly struck with his palm. The power of the great sun shifting technique exploded to the extreme, and in the blink of an eye, it smashed the array in front of Elder Ancestor Bai's place of seclusion. Even the door had collapsed. At this time, everyone present felt that something was wrong. Chu Xiu was openly attacking in the fluttering snow city of the far north. He was simply arrogant to the extreme. Why was Elder Ancestor Bai not attacking? Could it be that something had happened to Elder Ancestor Bai? Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to attack, Bai Hantian's face was full of fear. He wanted to stop him, but he was not faster than Chu Xiu's speed. Another Buddha's seal fell, directly smashing Elder Ancestor Bai's place of seclusion. What appeared in front of everyone was not the true fire spirit ascension powerhouse that they had imagined, but a mummy protected by an array. It was still emitting the coercion of a true fire spirit ascension powerhouse. Bai Hanfeng, who had not shown himself, stood beside the mummy, activating the array. In an instant, everyone seemed to have understood everything. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.